8 o'clock, time to go over the agenda. Mr. Pate, you gonna handle the invocation this morning? Pledge of allegiance, Mr. Camardi.
Yes, sir.
Discussion of the agenda. Mr. Wood, if you want to.
Yes, sir. We have two additions that the clerk has reminded me about. One, just to remind everybody, at 12 o'clock noon today, we have the tour of the mobile dental unit. And I know everybody wants to see that. That's a pediatric dental unit that we'll be taking around to all the elementary schools, just to remind you. Joe, do you want to add anything since you're on the health board?
No, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Okay. Also, Marcia just wanted me to remind you, she's got the jail tour photos in PowerPoint. If you want to see any of those today, if anybody wants to, if we finish up early and you want to see anything, comment on that publicly or not. I thought it was a great tour. I think most of you saw the email. The architects were very complimentary of the board because they've never had a full board turn out for a tour like that. So they were very impressed that all of you showed up for that. Other than that, Mr. Chairman, we do have do need a closed session for several items, but I believe that's listed on here.
Mr. George,
Yes, sir.
don't you think it'd be a good idea for us to wait to have the discussion about the jail, because there's a lot of
Yes,
ifs and ands about
There
what
are.
we saw. And
right. And one thing we do need to do is Mr. Bell, as the chairman of the jail committee, would like to have a meeting with the committee as soon as possible so we can move forward with that. Okay. Anything else you want to?
well, I just want to say, because there's a lot of things about jail operation that just from the walkthrough like we did, you may not know the whole scope of things. You know?
Right.
And so
Okay.
I would like to get with the sheriff and Major Greenfield and talk about, because just to make it clear, some of those instances that we saw down there may not work here in Wayne County as far as a open bay type.
Okay.
Direct supervision, indirect supervision
Mhm.
is something that's going to have to be discussed too before
Okay.
we move forward, I think.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Mr. Gurley, you got, the appointment committee got any?
We have one, sir.
Have one. You gonna take care of that? Unfinished business, looks like all this unfinished business is action has to be taken on today. Is any one particular one that we need to go over county manager's recommendation for request additional East Point funding? Mr. Wood,
I've got that.
you've got that, you want?
Yes, sir. Do you want me to go over it now?
No.
I'd like for you to give us just a little bit of conversation on it, Mr. Wood. Only that I look at the great amount of money they're requesting in contrast to that part that we are the recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
And my concern is that there may be citizens that will slip through the crack for the services that these folks say they're going to provide. And I believe, as just some informal question and answer that I may have heard somewhere along the line, at some point in time, these folk used to provide the Board of County Commissioners with maybe a rundown or a list of the people that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, if they're not serving them, that would result in us reducing the funding to that amount, I don't have a problem. If they are serving them, I would like to see some proof that they are and who it is, and then we would have a baseline for reducing it from what their request of $370,000 to $42,000.
Mhm.
I just see that as such a great disparity that I would like to see some numbers that said, no, you don't deserve that, or yes, you do deserve it, or you deserve some of it, or is there some contingency fund that we would put in place as a safety net that they may draw on if there are people going that need some service. And if I remember that presentation, there was some discussion as to whether they showed up it was the people that would show up in the middle of the night or over in the morning or earlier than other services may open or something like that. I don't remember, but there was some discussion about the real down, hard to need and so forth and so on. And I'm just thinking about not all of Wayne County. I am thinking all of Wayne County, but I'm looking at the populations that may reside somewhere left or right of 117 South. And I know that there are some hard-pressed neighborhoods in districts 2 and 3 probably, that I would not want that population to fall through the cracks. And therefore, I have a little bit of concern about that particular one. I just feel like that group should have provided more numbers, can provide more numbers, or some look at it.
Let's just go into more detail in the regular meeting.
In the regular
In
meeting?
the regular meeting.
Okay.
And we'll discuss it in the regular
Okay.
meeting. Motion to approve agreement with Town of Mount Olive conveying the county's interest in jointly owned property at the Mount Olive Municipal Airport, and county funding for the said airport. You got?
I'm ready to do
you
that
ready to
one
do
as well.
Okay, all right. Motion to approve submissions of 2015-2016 legislative goals for the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners.
We may want to look at those now. The first page is, Marcia has given you the outline of it from David Thompson, the executive director. And then what we've done is given you one resolution, because as you read what the NCACC's process is, we either need to send each one of these up there with a resolution proving that the board has endorsed it, or we need a letter from the chairman. I thought the easiest thing to do was just pass one resolution that adopts all 4 goals. And then I believe since they go to different committees, Marcia, you'll send it up 4 different times, right? And
Yes, sir.
There's a form Marcia will also fill out that describes it a little bit. But essentially, the 4 items are to amend the current formula used for ranking surface transportation projects. That was the number 1 thing that we had talked about. Number 2 was increase the flexibility of use of the 911 fee revenues controlled by the State 911 Board, or in the alternative, add a local 911 fee. The idea was to have more flexibility in using some of those monies towards the operating expenses rather than strictly the property tax or sales tax funding them. Number 3, we know this will already be in their goals, but we just wanted to reiterate it because it's so critical, and that is restore the lottery funding that was taken by the General Assembly to balance the state's budget over the last several years. And as y'all know, there's a growing concern because in this year's session, they actually adopted a bill that said going forward, we can no longer pledge the lottery funds for repayment of school debt. Now, why would you pass that bill unless you were getting ready to go after that money? There's no other reason to pass that bill. So that's a concern there. The 4th one, since we met, Donna Phillips came to see me about this one. I thought we'd go ahead and add it. I didn't think it would be controversial, and that is to restore funding to state aid to public libraries fund to the pre-2011 level of $15.7 million and eliminate provisions that distribute state aid outside of the equitable formula developed by the State Library Commission. What that is the State Library Commission for 20, 30 years has had a formula for distributing whatever money the General Assembly allocates for state aid to libraries, how they would allocate it out among the county libraries, but there are also some regional libraries, so you have to take into account how you're going to split that money. And then there are still a few municipal libraries, so there's a formula that they use on that. And basically what has happened over the last 3 or 4 years is the state has been nibbling away every year at that state aid allocation, and it's down I believe it's somewhere in the 13 million category now instead of the 15.7. And then this year, they actually, part of it, they ignored the state aid formula and decided that they would change that somewhat, and that was done by the legislature to do that. And so what the State Library Commission, I checked on this, the State Library Commission endorses this change. And so I would recommend that you do that as well. It's a minor amount of the state budget, it's probably in the neighborhood of $2 million. And it just really doesn't make sense to have changed all of that and break out of that formula without letting the State Library Board go back through and tweak the formula. So those are the four goals that we had talked about, and then behind the resolution, we go into more detail on each one. I wasn't planning on reading through each one unless you want to go through that.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir, Mr. Doherty.
On the 911 center goal, it says increase the flexibility of the use of 911 fee revenues controlled by the state 911 board, comma, or add a local 911 fee. Should that not be and or? And what I mean by that is
To do both.
to do
You want to
both.
look at both? We can certainly add that.
Because-
I just didn't understand it that way. I thought y'all said in the alternative do it, but you can
Well,
certainly change it either way you want. We'll change
That'd
this.
give more flexibility because I
does.
think there's going to be some pushback.
Yeah,
And so by putting and or in there, it may give a little bit more flexibility. And the other question I had was, what is the procedures going forward with this? This goes to, you said 4 different committees?
well, you submit it to NCACC. They
Okay.
have, if you look at that first page, I believe they have like 6 standing
If you
committees.
look on page 20, it lists the steering committees that it goes to,
Yeah,
the bottom right.
Page 20,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Well, let's clarify one thing, though. It says committees, but the ones of us that has been involved in this, and I've been involved a whole lot less than some others, there's one person running the show. I mean, they can say committee all they want to, but it's. Are you patting your foot, Joe, or? Yeah. Okay, all right.
you're talking about on the
On the
911 thing?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
At state
Oh, I
level.
thought you were talking about with our counties.
Well, I did too, and I was sitting here thinking, who is that?
State level. No, it's state
I
level.
said, well, who is this dude?
Yeah, it's at state level.
Okay, I see what you're saying, on the 911.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah. There's no doubt about that one.
But actually, this would be submitted over to the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. They will then send it to the
To the
different
appropriate
committees,
committees.
who will then review it and make a recommendation.
Right, and you also have an opportunity, even if you aren't on that committee, since we're recommending the goal, if anybody wants to go down there and testify before the committee, we can do that. And given that we're only an hour from Raleigh, I would recommend those that we feel that strongly about, which obviously the road formula we do, I think we should do that.
Mr. Chairman,
A road trip.
Mr. Mayor.
I was looking at the steering committee page 20. If you had something to do with economic development, what category would you fall under as far as the steering committee? General government? I don't see anything on there that has to do with economic development.
Yeah, what page was that?
Page
20.
Well, I had a little problem figuring some of these out myself.
And the reason I'm saying that is that I know that these are legislative goals, but we do have steering committees for different departments of the state government. And my concern is that I know I got some emails where the legislature's coming out with a bipartisan bill, but I'm concerned about incentives for industry, and I'm also concerned about the 1NC program, because I know that Mike Haney has been to several meetings, and they've changed it to where You have to have 30 jobs. In Wayne County, you'd have to create 30 jobs to be eligible for any incentives for the 1NC. And now it's 20. And I want to make sure that our legislature, whoever, Commerce, understands that we need to keep that number at 20 and not raise it to 30.
Well, we could add that as one of these goals.
Yeah,
I
let's
can
add
easily
that
write
to
that
one of the
down.
goals.
Because
Ray, I would think it would go under tax and finance, because finance would deal with the incentives, and that's really what you're speaking to
Yes.
is incentives. So it's gotta be either that one or general government, but I would think it's tax and finance.
But I think we need to stand in the forefront on this thing, because it can hurt Wayne County and east of I-95 if they do raise it to 30. Now, it's a lot of it's word of mouth at this point, but the key is there's not anything being set in stone. So as long as it's not, we can still ask them to keep it the way it is, keep the 20 jobs created and institute the 1NC program based on 20 job creation.
Okay. Does everybody wanna add that? Is that
I
what
just wanted to add to what he's saying, and he's right. I don't know if you read, well, I read with great interest this morning that Toyota shot us down, and we're gonna give them $100 million. So it looks like they're putting all the eggs in one basket and forgetting us out here in the east and probably in the west.
Well, and
We need to protect our interests, because we need economic development here as well to grow.
And you mentioned the Toyota deal. North Carolina did offer $100 million to get them to move their headquarters here. And then went to Texas for $50 million. Now, there's just something that's,
Well, you know,
I'm not a mathematician, but I can figure out the difference in 50 million and then 100 million. I mean,
My gut reaction to that would be is Texas has no state income tax.
that's what I was getting ready to say. They're looking at the long term.
Yeah.
They'll probably come out 200 million
That's
ahead.
right.
You
That's-
know,
okay.
that's where it's at.
There's about 8 states that have no state income tax.
I'm gonna let them
They just gotta remember that small business is the backbone
Right.
of all job growth, and, it's not all just large business. I just put that in there.
Ray, that was the North Carolina, what did you call it, the
NC1 program.
NC1 program, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're in agreement that we're gonna be adding that resolution as well.
Right, what I've got down on the resolution is leave the threshold for NC1 program at 20 jobs. And then I'll write up something, and we'll add that in for Marcia to submit.
Yeah,
But if we have it in the resolution, then we've got it covered.
and if you wanted to talk to Mike Haney.
Yeah, I'll do
he's
that.
up to date on this.
I'll do that before I write it up then, and
Yeah.
we'll get it sent off. But by putting it in the resolution, we're showing that you've adopted it as a goal. Okay.
Okay.
So those are the 5 goals that we have. Is there anything else? I think that covers what we discussed. We've added we had 3, and we added the library, and now we're adding the NC1 program, remaining at 20 jobs for the threshold for
Well,
participation.
Yeah, but if I could, also, would you contact them and let's get the names of these individuals that are serving on these committees, so that maybe we could give them a call.
Yeah.
It's on the website.
It's
It
on the
is.
website.
Okay, so if you'll print that off for
That'd be
everybody.
great.
I think it'd be good to print it off and give it to all of you,
Yeah.
because different ones of you may have met some of these folks, at the conferences and all, and then if you got a personal contact, that's even better. Okay.
And is Commissioner Pate, are you serving on any of those?
I'm on the ag committee as well as the executive board.
Okay, all right.
So I've had an opportunity to get to know a number of these people.
And ultimately, these goals do go to the executive board, because ultimately, it's the legislative goals for the whole association.
Okay.
And then you'll vote on them. They'll have a legislative conference, either in December or January. January. And you'll go to that and you vote on it there too. Okay.
Any other questions or comments on the unfinished business? If not, consent agenda. Anyone have an issue with the 3 items that's on the consent agenda? Do you have any discussion on them, Mr. Wood?
No, sir. I think they're very straightforward. They're similar to what we've done. All of these would have qualified had they filed in a timely manner. So all you're doing is allowing them to do it after the deadline.
New business, motion to approve engineering contract for drainage ditch permitting and cleaning at the Wayne Executive Jetport.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, this is one that the Airport Advisory Board's been working on, and Ray may want to talk to it as well. We have an issue there where those drainage ditches have not been maintained, I guess, for some period of time, and periodically they do need to be cleaned out. What this is doing is we're trying to get some federal money, FAA money, for the cleanup. So and it would have to be engineered and approved by them anyway. So we're asking for this contract with our consulting engineer at the airport to authorize them to go after it, and also to try to they have to get the Section 404 permit from the Corps of Engineers and a Section 401 water quality certification, including approval under NUIS buffer rules. So you have to do all of this basically just to clean out ditches anymore, which is kind of ridiculous, but that's where we're at. So he would do all of those things and then try to see if there's any funding for that. Now, Milford will try to do most of the work ourselves. As y'all recall, you bought an excavator last year, so we think we can do a lot of the work in-house, but we've got to have the design specs, we've got to have these permits. So that's the purpose of this. And it will be funded out of the airport fund, not the general fund.
You got any comments, Mr. Mayor?
Just to add that some of these ditches are blue line ditches, and you wouldn't believe around the airport, the restrictions on the slope of the ditch bank, all this around an airport standard procedure. Some of it we can do, as George has mentioned, but that's why we need a consultant and make sure that we get this right, because we do have some blue line ditches. We got some trees growing in some of the bottom of those ditches, 6 inches diameter, and so we have a flooding problem at certain times in the hangars, and that's not a good thing. So it's been moved to the top of the priority list as far as the advisory committee.
Mr. Gurley, you've been involved in the airport for a number of years too. Have you got any comments?
I agree with what Ms. Mayor is saying.
Okay. Thank y'all. Budget amendments, Allison, you gonna handle the budget amendments for us today?
I'll handle them.
You handle them?
Yes, sir.
All right. But thank you for being
So,
here.
y'all will, just don't ask me too many questions on it.
By the way, you never,
Wayne County Courthouse bail presentation.
This,
I don't have a clue what's going on with that.
okay, what's going on there is the former facilities director requested to come see me, Mr. Smith, Shelton Smith, and he had written a narrative describing the history of the Wayne County Courthouse bell, which, as y'all know, is in our atrium in the courthouse here. He has asked that be read into the minutes, and so I've asked Marcia to do that as part of the presentation today. Mr. Smith will be here.
Okay.
And, but he and Milford and I went. The other thing he wanted to look at was, if you look out at the atrium, the bell does sit up about almost 6 feet tall, but people do occasionally still go by and thump it or something, trying to ring the bell. And so we were just going to put like a little plastic casing, transparent casing about 18 inches high right at the top there, and that should preclude anybody being able to reach in and do something with it. So that's what this is about.
Okay. Any other new business need to be added to the agenda other than our 12 o'clock general lab tour?
No, sir.
Okay. Anyone else have anything they need to add? Okay, and we're going to have a work session discussion on the ordinance regulating the operation and maintenance of solar energy facilities in Wayne County.
This is a follow-up to the work session we had, I guess it was 2 weeks ago. Y'all had asked the planning director, Connie Price, to go back and do a comparison between what the school of government's model ordinance was and what ours was, so that you could see if we've been more lenient on something or if we've been more restrictive on something than the model ordinance calls for. So Connie will be here to go through that section by section, and you'll see the way he's worded it. He's got, at the pertinent parts, he's got where what the school of government is side by side with what he's recommending here, so that we can go through those differences.
And Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Carter.
I did some research and have some handouts that I wanted to pass out. And during that discussion, I do want to talk about Mount Olive's solar farm ordinance. Oh, okay.
Let me share. One more back. One more. There you go. Thank you.
But anyway, this is solar farm ordinance, a real simple solar farm ordinance in Mount Olive that I want to bring into this conversation as well later on. But just want to give you a copy of it.
Okay, thank you. We will need to go into closed session today, Mr. Parker.
Yes, sir, to consider the qualifications, performance, conditions of initial employment, discuss matters relating to business, consult with an attorney to preserve the attorney-client privilege, and to possibly discuss the acquisition of property.
Mr. Chairman, I move we go into closed session.
Okay. We'll do it in closed session. Okay, 10 a.m.
All right, go ahead.
10 a.m. at our public comment section, limited to 4 minutes. And we'll have the county manager's comments, board of commissioners, committee reports and comments. Our information is in the back of the packet. Mr. Darden's got a motion on the floor that we go into closed session. Do we have to vote on that?
Yes.
I have a motion on the floor that we go in closed session. Any discussion? All in favor, show sign of right hand. Motion carried unanimously. Business of the Wayne County Board of Commissioners. Our invocation, Mr. Pate.
Yes, sir. Let's bow our heads. Dear Heavenly Father, as we gather here today to perform the work of the people, I ask that you lead us down the right path. As we take this journey together, please protect all of our citizens, our men and women in uniform, and these commissioners as we work together for the continued betterment of Wayne County. And let's remember the Hope family today as they have lost a loved one, and I keep it in your prayers. We humbly ask for your blessings in the name of your Son. Amen.
Mr. Kamara,
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
thank you, Mr. Pate, Mr. Kamara. Discussion, adjustments to the agenda, Mr. Wood.
Marcia, we didn't
We
have
were
any
gonna have the
adjustments.
dental tour, the dental mobile.
Right, we have the tour at 12 o'clock, so if we're not through, we should be through, but if we're not, then we would need to break for that
Okay.
and take that in and then come back.
Okay. Approval of the minutes of the August 19th, 2014 meeting.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion on the floor. We approve the minutes of August 19th, 2014 meeting. Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Pate.
on page 5 at the bottom where I was talking about the National Guard, could we add in there, that was an awareness briefing and this is not a definite downsizing? Because it's not a done deal.
Can you take care of that, Mr. Marshall?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pate. Any other discussion? All in favor of approving the minutes of August 19th, 2014, show sign of right hand. Motion carries. Appointment committee, Mr. Gurley.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, appointment committee met this morning. The Wayne County Adult Care Advisory Committee has one vacancy. Make a motion to recommend reappointment of Melissa Watkins.
I have a motion on the floor from the appointment committee to reappoint Melissa Watkins to the Adult Care Home Community Advisory Council. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Gurley.
We announced some vacancies. We have vacancies in the Goldsboro Planning Board. There's one vacancy there. The Mount Olive Planning Board is one alternate. Mount Olive Board of Adjustment, one alternate. And the Fremont Board of Adjustment, two vacancies. And just remind everyone, all of these appointments must live inside the ETJ of the municipality. And that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gurley. Unfinished business. Item number 1, county manager's recommendation on requested additional funding for East Point for fiscal year 2015. Mr. Wood.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, you have the recommendation in your packet. I'll just go through and hit some of the high points on it. As you recall, East Point did not submit a budget request until the fiscal year 2015 budget was completed. At that time, I suggested that the CEO, Mr. Ken Jones, present any request to you at the budget hearing. He did that and requested the following: $225,000 for the Waynesboro Family Clinic, which is a walk-in crisis clinic, $100,000 in integrated healthcare system with Goshen Medical Clinic, and $45,000 for a family drug treatment court. So the whole request was $370,000. You had reduced the annual appropriation to $42,000 in fiscal year 2014, and I had recommended the same amount for fiscal year 15 to cover the family drug treatment court. East Point makes the argument that under North Carolina General Statute 122C-115A, mental health, developmental disabilities, and substance abuse are to be funded by both the state and counties. However, there is no statutory minimum requirement counties must meet. In addition, East Point cites NCGS 122C-115D, requiring a maintenance of effort, meaning funding should remain at the same level as previous years. However, many counties across the state are not meeting that criteria, particularly in light of the Affordable Care Act that mandates individual coverage in 2014 and will mandate employer-provided coverage by early 2015. President Obama had delayed the employer-mandated insurance by 1 year. It should not require the same amount of money for a walk-in crisis clinic for psychiatric patients that Medicaid does not cover if the ACA now mandates that coverage in every insurance policy for those citizens not on Medicaid or Medicare. Once the ACA is fully operational, it should significantly reduce the uninsured population. That is the basis on which the Obama administration and Congress sold it to the public. East Point makes the further argument that fund balance from Medicaid funds cannot be used for non-Medicaid individuals. I have confirmed with the NCACC staff that this is correct. And that's been an issue I think there's been some misunderstanding on, so I wanted to emphasize I did check that with Rebecca Troutman. And you cannot use any Medicaid fund balance for non-Medicaid uses. So East Point is correct on that point. However, East Point should not need to use fund balance if the changes in federal health care law have or will shortly mandate people buy insurance to cover these services if their employer does not provide it. And employers with over 50 full-time employees are mandated to provide the insurance for employees. The second request was for a $100,000 match of proposed state funds for a physical psychiatric treatment program to be provided by Goshen Medical Clinic. My understanding is that this funding was not approved at the state level, so there's no reason to do that. So that's the $100,000 request. And then the third part, you funded the Family Drug Treatment Court at $42,000, the same as last year. So the real issue is the walk-in crisis psychiatric clinic. The MHDD-SA system has been in constant flux for the last few years. For example, the former East Point LME, 4 counties, merged with Beacon Center LME and the Southeastern Regional LME to form the current 12-county East Point. Discussions are being held now to merge East Point into an MCO comprising about 34 counties. In addition, Medicaid is the single biggest problem in the North Carolina state budget and has been for at least 4 years. The state is desperately trying to curb the growth of this financial burden. Consequently, it is constantly changing the rules of the game. LMEs became MCOs, and now they may possibly become ACOs. There is a significant movement to consolidate the number of organizations, as evidenced by a 4-county LME going to a 34-county MCO within 2 to 3 years. One of the issues is that East Point, quote, earmarks county monies for specific services, but does not track from an accounting standpoint what each county has earmarked and whether that amount has been underspent or overspent for each county's citizens. In other words, we have no assurance that if you contribute more money, that all of it will be used for Wayne County citizens. That is different from the LME I am familiar with, which accounted for each of 3 counties separately and carried forward any unspent money to the credit of each specific county. Since the money is pooled, not individually allocated by county, it bears noting that Wayne County provided 3 floors of the Borden building to East Point at no cost from 2004 until fiscal year 2014. In other words, our taxpayers made an in-kind contribution to the operation of the other that none of the other counties made, in effect subsidizing their operation for about 9 years. We began charging $120,000 in annual rent in fiscal year 2014. Another issue is that while you gave a $500 bonus to our employees this year, East Point gave 4% raises to its employees. It is hard for me to justify that kind of raise in today's economic climate. Another issue that I had addressed with Mr. Jones is that their fiscal year 2013 audit shows a policy of providing free medical insurance until age 65 for employees who retire with only 5 years of service. Mr. Jones assured me that policy was ended in the current year for all future employees. By comparison, Wayne County in 2009 stopped a policy of awarding it after 25 years of service. A 5-year threshold is a ridiculously expensive fringe benefit that this organization clearly could never afford. And we are going to be stuck paying for all the current retirees, 36 according to the audit, and any current employees that were already hired prior to this change in policy. It is hard to justify giving more taxpayer money to an organization that is giving excessive raises and fringe benefits that our own employees and taxpayers do not get. In summary, we don't know how the potential merger with 33 other counties will play out. Not all of the provisions of the Affordable Care Act have been implemented. The Obama administration has changed the law by administrative ruling multiple times, and that is now the subject of a lawsuit by the U.S. House of Representatives. So we don't know how that will play out. Medicaid patients are covered under the state's PMPM, per member per month capitation rate. The ACA required those not on Medicaid or Medicare to have insurance in 2014, including mental health and substance abuse treatments. There are subsidies for the poor to purchase insurance coverage under the ACA. The ACA will require the employer mandate in early 2015, which will also require these coverages. So the question is, who will not be covered by insurance that will need this additional funding in Wayne County? We need to see how this plays out. It appears that everyone will be covered if the ACA works as designed. There's one other point I want to make about this that's not in the memo, and that is that currently Medicaid, as y'all know, the level for income to qualify for Medicaid is set by state law and a state administrative regulation. If you use something other than that, that would mean that the Waynesboro Psychiatric Clinic, if it were going to use this money, if you gave it to them truly for the most needy, would need to get into the income verification business. Because I'm assuming what you don't want to do is give additional money for a crisis center and then have it spent for somebody who was fully insured and fully capable of meeting the copays and the deductibles. So unless they're prepared to get into the income verification business, which I seriously doubt, then I would question how they're going to make sure that any money you gave them goes to the most needy to meet any copays or deductibles. And they don't have to do it for insurance because the ACA is going to cover the basic insurance. We need to also consider the impact on the county's budget, particularly going forward. You are facing $1,053,913 of additional debt service payments for the Grantham and Spring Creek Middle Schools beginning in fiscal year 2016. That starts next July 1st, so it comes into play in 10 months. You are facing a major capital cost for a new jail that is yet to be determined. It is absolutely essential and cannot be delayed. I cannot give you an exact price or the required debt service until we are further into the design and bidding stages, but it will clearly be an expensive proposition. And then you have to factor in the additional personnel and operating costs for that jail. Finally, you still face the possibility of the state seizing still more of our lottery funding for school construction debt service, particularly since the General Assembly passed legislation this year that lottery funds could no longer be pledged as a revenue source for the repayment of school construction debt service. Obviously, they are setting the stage to seize more of this funding. Why else would such a bill be enacted? Given the uncertainty surrounding MHDDSA services structure and policy at the state and local levels, the confusion over what the ACA covers and whether anyone will remain uninsured after final implementation, and the additional financial obligations that the county faces in fiscal year 2016, I recommend that you keep the current funding of $42,000 in place for East Point in fiscal year 2015 with no additional funding.
Okay, y'all have heard Mr. Wood's recommendation. Any questions for Mr. Wood? Or any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Daugherty.
I move that we accept the recommendation of the county manager and keep the current funding at $42,000 for East Point for fiscal year 2015 with no additional funding.
Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion on the floor. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the CEO of East Point is here. I don't know if he have anything he want to say about what Mr. Wood said or anything of that sort, if that's possible, or even if it's proper. I don't know, I'm just asking.
Mr. Parker, I mean,
So, back to the board.
what's the pleasure of the board? I mean, I don't have a problem with Mr. Jones speaking.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
unless it's something different from the presentation he gave previously, I don't see where it's necessary.
Okay.
I agree.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Camardi.
After having heard Mr. Wood's lengthy explanation of the information he's provided us, I take that to mean that he's discussed it, investigated it, and can assure us that our basic population is going to be taken care of this coming year without, and I realize anyone can slip through the cracks, but without a significant number slipping through the cracks without a safety net someplace. And I heard it said that we probably don't need any other discussion of it or any presentation or any, I won't use the word rebuttal, but any new information that might come from the East Point director. But, and the information that I guess this was what the presentation came from previous, what they made.
That's what the gentleman from Waynesboro
Okay,
Clinic provided at that
okay.
meeting.
And just to look at this, from the Waynesboro Clinic, and Mr. Bell, I believe, sort of alluded to something as a first cousin to this, that companies would provide where the services went. I'm looking, if I don't misunderstand it, 164 persons were seen in the walk-in clinic. 164 of those were Wayne County residents, and 13 of them were out of the county. So unless I miss it, the dollars that the walk-in clinic was getting was pretty much serving the members of Wayne County. And I appreciate the comparison, or at least the information as it relates to the Affordable Care Act, that if all that falls into place, then there's a safety net there to catch those folks.
They're supposed to be.
Okay. Just for the record, if it's not out of line, the gentleman from, if the gentleman from East Point has any information that would cause us to believe that there are folk out there that won't get that service, then it might be worth it to hear that, just for the record. Because at the end of the day, I would not want it to be said that we did not at least have some sort of a contingency fund in there, not that whole $370,000, but something that would have a safety net for folk who could potentially fall through the crack, given that the Affordable Care Act has not been fully investigated and no one fully understands it yet. So that's sort of where I'm at this morning, and that's not an indication that I would not vote to support the recommendation from our manager, because I think he's investigated to the full extent of what we have on the table at this point. But I just share that to say, is there, and this is to any of my colleagues, is there any thought that you may have that there may be somebody out there that we may need to consider?
Any other comments from anyone?
I've got
Mr. Gurley.
a question, comment. I'm a little behind. I missed an earlier presentation in June, and I do recall some 10 years ago, there's probably mental health in each county in the state, and then it went to the LMDs, and now it's going over to MCOs and stuff. I guess my question, concern is, what are other counties doing Are we missing something here, or, without knowing what East Point's budget is, what their expenditures are, what their revenue streams are, I'm kind of at all here trying to figure some of these things out.
Off the top of my head, I think their budget right now is somewhere around 178 million. If they combine, I think we're looking at over 300 million a year. Does that sound right? What's the
Our budget is 303 million.
303 million now? And that's for 12 counties, so if they go to 34, it's going to be much higher than that.
Well, I guess try to follow what Mr. Cromartie is saying, if this walk-in clinics is 164 and 13, are we getting some funding from other counties to help support this walk-in clinic? Is there a commitment there from other counties?
Well, they're paying into it, there's no question about that.
I just don't think I got enough information today.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bell.
See, the point that I'm trying to make, I don't want other counties to have to pay for Wayne County residents. That's why we was funding Waynesboro in the beginning, because Waynesboro was taking care of all of our Wayne residents, especially those that, if I'm not, of course, I was off the board for a while, and I don't remember whether or not these people were on Medicaid or not. They were just walk-in people that, and Waynesboro is a very unique clinic. There's not many counties that have those type of clinics where people can just walk in and get mental health treatment. And the other thing that I'm concerned about is that either they get treated or they end up in Wayne County Jail. And that happens all the time, where you don't give them an opportunity to walk in and get some type of mental health intervention. So,
Well, in terms of the numbers in the past, what you were saying, Joe, the question is, what is it going to be going forward? And of course, what's different now is the ACA has started to be implemented. It started in March of this year, or April, when the individual mandate went into effect. So that just became available about 5 months ago. And of course, the employer mandate kicks in on the 1st of January, is my understanding, of 2015, because the president delayed that. Both of them were supposed to go into effect January 1 of 2014. So they were supposed to have gone into effect at that point. And one was delayed, the individual mandate was delayed until April, the other one was delayed for a full year. So they all should be in place sometime during this fiscal year. The individual mandate is already in place. So if your employer doesn't provide it, you're already required under the law, and have been for 4 or 5 months, to provide that insurance yourself.
Through the Affordable Care Act.
Through the Affordable Care Act, and then if you can't afford the full premium, then there, with the exchanges and things, there are subsidies within the law for that, to help low-income folks to acquire the insurance. But it's mandated that everybody have the insurance.
You see, and that's where, Mr. Wood, that's where we sort of get to this place in there. What folk ought to be doing versus what they are doing, versus what, when they don't wind up doing that, for whatever reason, they didn't get the Affordable Care insurance in place, that population will somehow or another wind up not being served, and at hours that is going to do sort of what Mr. Bell said. Now, this is just a thought. I know you said that Wayne Clinic may not want to get into income verification, but if it's important enough to serve a population, I think they should be willing to make sure that they are serving the at-risk population and not serving someone who just might, their family members say, well, this is the most convenient place to take them, and they can well afford to have provided something else for them. I'm not talking about opening this up for just anyone to walk into who could afford to be someplace else, who maybe their family members should have taken them someplace else. But there is a significant number of people, and I come in contact with them sometimes, that they just don't have transportation, family around them, and I've seen them needing help, because I've seen them acting like they probably need a little bit of help, so I won't get too far into that, but that's my concern of that group. Now, is it possible, gentlemen, that we might amend the motion to say, and I just not made it yet, but I'm just talking, that we would put a certain number of dollars in a certain category that Wayne, the walk-in clinic, could have access to upon verification that they were needy? Is that too far out there?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Page.
I think the investigation and the work that Mr. Woods put in this recommendation is thorough and accurate. The argument that this county is not giving enough, there's a formula that the state legislature has laid out that each county pays. And if they're unhappy with the money they're getting, they need to go back to the state legislature and not to the counties. And we're meeting our maintenance effort, and when I see what we're doing here. So, and I understand what you're saying, Mr. Martin, but then it comes down to personal responsibility too.
You mean on the person?
So
Oh, I'm sorry.
excuse me. And so I support the recommendation, and I'm ready for a question.
Mr. Bear.
Why can't East Point cover these? I understand it's because the requirement is that you can't use this money for non-Medicaid purposes, is that
Yeah,
right?
the bulk of their money comes from the state, and it's primarily for Medicaid folks, and so I think there's been a misunderstanding in the past, thinking that if they had Medicaid fund balance, if they had underspent their Medicaid budget, which is the preponderance of their budget, that money would be available to fund non-Medicaid eligible services. And in checking that out with the NCACC, I talked to their Director of Research, Rebecca Troutman. She confirmed, now initially, she thought they could, and then she came back to me. When I talked to Mr. Jones, he was convinced they could not. So I asked her to go back and further research that and verify that for me, and she came back and said she was wrong, that they could not use it.
Okay.
And so I wanted to give you that explanation as part of this report, because that had been a misunderstanding, I think, in the past. So you cannot use the Medicaid fund balance that may build up for non-Medicaid uses.
Okay, this is where I think maybe we have a safety net, because we know under the Affordable Care Act that this should happen.
Right.
Okay, why don't we go back and get the association and East Point to see if they can get the law changed to cover these people, because there's money from the state that's available. There's plenty of money available to cover these people. So yes, why don't we use that as a safety net? In other words, rather than second guessing what the Affordable Care Act is going to be, why don't we let the Affordable Care Act do its thing, so to speak, and go back and see if we can get our laws changed to cover these people?
Well, you can do that, but Medicaid, remember, is a federal program.
Well,
so it would have to be a change in the federal regulations to allow that.
Okay, let's get with our congressman, find out if it's something we can do, because it doesn't make sense to me that if it's a mental issue, it's a health issue, in my opinion. How in the world can it not be covered? It doesn't make sense.
Well, according
We're covering
to
something twice. If we fund this, we're covering something twice that is going to be covered under the Affordable Care Act, from what you're saying.
that's my understanding.
Okay, well,
Because everybody, going back to Mr. Cromartie's comment, everybody has to provide the insurance. If you don't, you're violating the law, and as you know, there'll be penalties, and the IRS is responsible for imposing those penalties on people. So if they don't provide it, if they don't get the insurance, then they are in fact violating that law, and they've got to do it, because you can't have some people paying and some people not paying. That was the gist of the court case, as y'all know, that when the ACA was challenged in court, it was whether American citizens could be forced to buy a product. And the answer is yes. And that's what the Supreme Court came down on. The ruling was that everybody could be required to provide the insurance or have to pay a penalty for not carrying it. I guess My feeling about that is if someone is required under the law to do something and doesn't do it, I don't see why that falls to the taxpayers to then bail them out. If everybody else is paying for the insurance and people who have a problem affording it, the reason that healthcare is costing more and everybody's had concerns about the ACA is because we are in fact subsidizing those premiums. So we're, in essence, taking care of it at the federal level.
Any other discussion? I have a motion on the floor. We've heard Mr. Wood's recommendation. We've had quite a bit of discussion. My question is, do we need more information? I know Mr. Wood's recommendation is quite thorough. I just, do we need more information? Which I know we've got a motion on the floor, but what's the pleasure of the board? Do we want more information, or do we want to go ahead and vote on the motion? I just need some guidance from the board member.
We have a motion on the floor, can we call for the question?
Yeah, let's call the question.
We got a motion on the floor. We got a motion on the floor.
If the question's been called, that stops the discussion.
Okay.
That's right.
I have a motion on the floor. Mr. Darty, will you repeat your motion one time for us, please, if you could?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the county manager's recommendation to keep the current funding of $42,000 in place for East Point in fiscal year 2015 with no additional funding.
I have a motion on the floor. All in favor, show sign of right hand. All opposed? Wilson, the vote is 5-2. Next item. Motion to approve agreement with the town of Mount Olive conveying the county's interest in jointly owned property at the Mount Olive Municipal Airport and county funding for said airport. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Chairman, you have a memo in your packet, and in that I explained that Commissioner Mayo and I met with officials from the town of Mount Olive to discuss the possible conveyance of the county's interest in jointly owned property comprising portions of the Mount Olive Municipal Airport. In addition, we discussed the financial support that the county provides for the operation of this airport in the annual budget. We came to an agreement on the attached agreement that Borden Parker has drafted for you. Essentially, it states that the county will offer to convey at no cost, and the town of Mount Olive will accept a quitclaim deed for any property interest the county may have in the properties currently jointly owned that make up portions of the Mount Olive Municipal Airport. This would give the town sole ownership of the airport property. And if you recall from the maps that we've discussed before, it's in excess of 50% of the property. Isn't that correct, Board?
About, I didn't bring my.
Yeah, it's about that.
About prepared the deed.
Right. In addition, the county agrees to fund the operating budget for the Mount Olive Municipal Airport at not less than the current budgeted amount, which is $33,281 for the current fiscal year, which is fiscal year 15, fiscal year 16, and fiscal year 17. And these are the fiscal years in which budgets will be adopted by the currently seated Board of Commissioners. So in other words, you would make a commitment, because you will be seated here during that time, that you would keep it at least at that amount and not go below that. After that, the contribution shall be subject to the annual budgetary process of the county, and the parties will discuss said appropriation in good faith each year. Commissioner Mayo and I believe this is a fair agreement for both parties and recommend your approval. This removes any concerns that the county has about potential liability for any matter arising from the operation of Mount Olive Municipal Airport. And then you have the intergovernmental agreement, which Borden has drafted for you. And I had written down the bullet points prior to giving this to Board and run those back through Charles Brown, the town manager. He replied by email. He was in concurrence that these were the points we had agreed to, and then Borden has drafted the agreement for you. So we would recommend that you adopt this agreement. They have approved it already in principle, but they were waiting for us to do the agreement.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor. Make a motion that we accept the recommendation on conveyance of county's portion of jointly owned property at the Mount Olive Airport as presented.
I have a motion on the floor. Any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bailey?
I'm going to vote for the motion, but I received some calls this past week. There's some big discussions going on down there, and I don't think we have anything to do with it. And I just want to know, by turning this over to the town of Mount Olive, there's a controversy going on between a citizen about a radio tower and all that stuff down there, and I think a couple other people got calls about that.
I did too.
So I don't know if Mr. Wood is aware of that, or...
I'm aware of it. We're not a party to that, and that is between him and the town of Mount Olive. It was before. We were never a party to that, correct? So I don't think this affects it at all. All we were doing is releasing any property interest we may have over to the town. So the matter would stay exactly where it is between that individual and the town of Mount Olive. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, this gentleman even asked me if we could hold the money. I said, no, we can't do that. we cannot.
My recommendation to you would be it's a matter between him and the town of Mount Olive, and I don't see holding up this. I don't think we would impact it one way or the other.
That's right.
Okay.
Appreciate that clarification.
I have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion? No other discussion. All in favor of Mr. Wood, Mr. Mayo's recommendation, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimous. Motion to approve submission of 2015-2016 legislative goals to the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Chairman, you have a resolution in your packet, as well as the process that the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners uses to establish its legislative goals process each year. This is the beginning of it, where they request from every county anything that you would like to see changed in either state statute or a state agency's administrative regulations that impacts counties. At the last meeting, we discussed these in depth. We started out with 3, and they're the first 3, and at today's meeting, we added 2 additional ones. Excuse me, at the 8 o'clock pre-meeting. So these 5 that are in the resolution are to amend the current formula used for ranking surface transportation projects. Number 2 is increase the flexibility of use of the 911 fee revenues controlled by the state 911 board, and we changed that to say and/or add a local 911 fee. Number 3, restore the lottery funding that was taken by the General Assembly to balance the state's budget over the last several years. Number 4, restore funding to state aid to public libraries fund to the pre-2011 level of $15.7 million and eliminate provisions that distribute state aid outside of the equitable formula developed by the State Library Commission. And number 5, which was added this morning, is leave the threshold for the NC1 program eligibility at 20 jobs. And with that, I'll be happy to go into any detail. We have, behind that, you have each goal written out, except for the NC1 program, which will be added. But I'll be happy to go over any of those you have any questions on, whether or not you want to do that for the public watching or not.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Mayor. Yes, the reason that the NC1 program, as far as funding for new industries, incentives, is that it looks like that our county is going to be at a 30-job threshold rather than a 20. And being on the economic development of Wayne County and on several boards inside the county and outside of the county, we feel that the legislature and Commerce needs to keep the existing 20 jobs created in order to get incentives from the state. I think it's critical east of I-95 that we do not move up to 30 jobs minimum to get incentives from the state. So we want to, I really believe that we need to push to maintain the 20 jobs, which will be more beneficial to Wayne County and all counties east of I-95. Just as, I explained this at the 8 o'clock session, but I wanted to do it on camera when everyone's listening in the audience. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
these
Bailey.
are 911 funds. This comes up every year through the NCAA, the NACO conference. And I hope this time that they will settle this thing once and for all, because we discuss this every year about the 911 funds, and the uses of them. So maybe they'll do something about it this time.
Any other comments? I would just like to follow up on what Mr. Mayo said. You know, with economic development, large companies coming in is great, but the driving force for employment in eastern North Carolina is the small businessman. I mean, like Mr. Mayo's business, Mr. Jordan's business. That's the driving force in economics in eastern North Carolina, and I agree with him 100%. And it needs to be kept at 20 instead of 30. Do I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Jordan.
I'll move that we approve the resolution approving the proposed legislative goals for consideration by the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners.
I have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor.
I wanted to mention one other thing on the incentives that I forgot a few minutes ago.
You need a
Is
minute.
that there's it's not set in stone yet, but it's in discussion to where Commerce, possibly on the state level, will not look at a project of less than 50 jobs. So if that's true, and we're going to keep an eye on this to see if this actually gets put in writing, but if it does, it throws right back on the county for looking for projects and being on our own for 50 jobs or less. So there is talk about it. At several meetings, it has been brought up, and we're going to keep an eye on that part because we may want to come back and do something different a little bit in the future to address that. But that's just an addition to what we're doing today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously. Consent agenda. Do I have a motion we accept the consent agenda? Unless anyone has any questions on any.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion on the floor that we accept the consent agenda. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously. New business. Motion to approve engineering contract for drainage ditch permitting and cleaning at Dwayne Executive Jetport. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Chairman, as we talked about previously, you have a memo here. The drainage system at the airport needs to be cleaned in order to function properly. In addition, the water table is close to the surface and creates problems in the proper functioning of the sewer system. We are getting quite a bit of I&I into the sewer system that is costly to treat. For both of these reasons, the Airport Advisory Board and their consulting engineer have prepared a proposal to do the necessary permitting for this project, and that proposal is attached. Milford and I joined the Airport Advisory Board in recommending you proceed with this work and award this engineering contract as the first step in this project. And just to reiterate, the funding will come from the airport fund, not the general fund. And primarily, the two permits are a Section 404 permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and a Section 401 water quality certification.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
Make a motion that we accept the recommendation on the Wayne Executive Jetport Drainage Ditch project as read.
I have a motion on the floor. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor.
As we discussed at the 8 o'clock session, We've had, we got ditches out there that are blue line ditches also that we got to get permits for. But I found out also that the Army Corps of Engineers, even the banks of the ditches, the angle of them, since it's around a jetport and airport, have to be to a certain standard. I guess that has to do with drainage as well as safety of an aircraft that may possibly end up in that ditch. But the restrictions are very tight as to what we can do. We're having some issues now with a heavy rainfall. We're having some problems with some of the hangars flooding. Those ditches haven't been cleaned in I don't know, decades. We have trees growing in the bottom of some of these drainage ditches. And we have a new excavator that the county just purchased a few months ago that has already saved the county a lot of money. We can do some of this work ourselves, but the blue line ditches, we may not be able to without some strict supervision. So just as a matter of some explanations, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any other discussion? If not, I have a motion on the floor. All in favor of Mr. Mayor's motion, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimous. Budget amendments, Mr. Wood's gonna handle the budget amendments this morning. We also have Allison here from the Finance Department to assist him if he needs any help. Mr. Wood, if you would take care of the budget.
All right. Mr. Chairman, this first one, this is an error, and so we're decreasing it because we mistakenly carried this forward, but there was no need to carry it forward. This was for a grant for Cooperative Extension Service, but the grant ended on 6/30/14, so no proposed budget was entered or needed.
Number 63.
Oh, yes, sir. Right, that's number 63. So that's actually a decrease in the budget.
With the pleasure of the board, you want to act on them individually, or you want him to go through them? And
Yeah, we only have a few. Let's,
Do
Mr.
them
Chairman,
all.
I move the adoption of budget amendment 63.
I have a motion on the floor. We accept budget amendment 63. Any discussion? All in favor, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
On the next one, number 64, the explanation is the same, it's just a different grant. This is the 4-H 21st Century Grant, and the decrease is $71,869. So again, that's a decrease in the general fund budget.
Pleasure of the board.
Move to accept.
I have a motion on the floor. We accept budget amendment number 64. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, show sign. Mr. Were you voting or were you?
I was voting.
I can't keep up with you. Sir. All in favor of the motion, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
The next one, when the state granted the $1,000, I mean the $500, when we did the $500 increase on the bonus, we have to do an equal amount for the Cooperative Extension folks, and that's what this is.
Motion to approve, Mr.
I
Chairman.
have a motion on the board. We approve budget amendment 81. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
The next one deals with Cooperative Extension, and it's to bring the total grant amount back up to $125,000 for budget years 7/1/14 through 6/30/15. The proposed fringe accounts were reduced because of reductions in rates on retirement, but it will also budget our anticipated employee bonuses, 2 of those at $500 and related fringes.
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion on the floor. We approve budget amendment 85. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
The next one is where we had an increase in concealed weapons fees and fingerprint fees, and the offset is we would increase miscellaneous supplies for the concealed weapons permit and miscellaneous supplies for the fingerprinting.
So moved, Mr. Chairman, budget number 69.
I have a motion on the floor to approve budget number 69. Any discussion? If no discussion, all in favor of budget amendment 69, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
Number 82 is an increase of $3,160.98. This is where the Sheriff's Department participated in an arrest which led to seized property. Part of that was turned over to the Sheriff's Department, the cash. So it's an increase of $3,160.98 is the increase in revenue.
So moved, number 82.
I have a motion on the floor. We approve budget amendment number 82. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimously.
This next one is, we do an estimation of how much to bring forward. On the Eastern Region money, we need to bring forward $18,481 in addition. So there was that much more fund balance than we anticipated, so we need to reappropriate it for this fiscal year.
Pleasure of the board.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion on the floor that we accept budget amendment number 77. Any discussion? If no discussion, all in favor of budget amendment 77, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimous.
This next one is also a reappropriation. As you recall, you got about $1.8 million of Eastern Region money, not the loan pool, but a money allocation. And you split that into 4 different categories. One of those was improvements to the jet port. And so we need to carry forward the remaining funds there. That's $341,294.75. So it would be fund balance appropriated of that amount, and then setting that aside, the Eastern Region money for airport improvements.
So moved, Mr. Chairman. I have a motion on the floor. We accept budget amendment number 78. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, show sign of right hand. Motion carries unanimous.
The next one is to decrease the amount of fund balance appropriated to make the debt service payments on the Eastern Region by $200,000. And part of that is the amount we have to repay, and also the fact that some of that will be repaid by other parties rather than the county.
Pleasure of the board.
Motion to approve, Mr.
I
Chairman.
have a motion on the floor. We accept budget amendment number 83. Any discussion? If no discussion, all in favor, show sign of right hand.
We need to go to public comments.
That concludes the budget amendments.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Thank you, Alice. It is 10 o'clock, time for our public comment section or comments. We ask that any individual that would like to make comments, your time limit is 4 minutes. Please state your name, address, and phone number. If anyone has any public comments at this time, please step forward. You're on the wrong side of the bench.
Will Branson, 270 Airport Road, Pike, MC, 27863-736-3711. Gentlemen, I know you've been working on solar energy for it. Sometimes, I think right now you're working basically just on the regulations and ordinances and all that. I can ask one question for my comment. Are you all discussing your own county solar energy at all, discuss that?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Well, I've been doing a lot of research on solar energy for the past few months, and I've got quite a few bit of information and regulations, so I'm willing to help you in any way I can if you'd like that. And you have a work session after this meeting, is that correct?
Yes,
If you'd like me
sir.
to, I can stay around a few minutes and kind of give you some comments. I have been working with Raleigh quite a bit on that, and I've got a pretty good collection of regulations and rules and regulations, so it might be of interest to save you some time and work on that. But the time limit is running out if you're looking at solar, and I would recommend that you look strongly at doing solar yourself. With the energy bills you have now and what you're going to be having in the future, it'll pay off in the long run. I've talked to the people in Raleigh, and is there any negative factors you've seen about the solar energy field as far as pollutions and that sort of thing? And they said they have found nothing at all, no complaints in it. Just a few people don't like the sights of them, but that's normal. But a lot of energy there. And right now, the state is ending their aid to the program in December this year, and the feds are scheduled to end theirs next year. So anybody's looking to get into it, now's the time to do it, and that's why you're seeing a lot of this work going on right now. The state has said that a lot of these energy companies that put in these solar fields already have packages ready to go that have already been approved for certain size packages, like a 5 acre and 25 acres. And right now, 25 acres is a big deal because you can get a lot of solar energy put out at one time, and the permits are already pretty much prepackaged, and it's a matter of just signing the agreement to do the projects. So there's a lot of work's already been done. If you know what the background is, it can move through quite rapidly. But I would encourage you to take a good hard look at it because electricity is not getting any cheaper.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I will back up to, we have just approved the funds for 2 new schools that are solar efficient.
Right.
And that's, to my knowledge, that's the only discussion that we've had. And that was quite a lengthy discussion on that project at times.
Well, one other thing, since we've got some time left on it, is with the packages they've got right now, with the rules they have, if you get let's say a 5 acre field, for the county, 5 acres would use all the electricity on the utility bills you have. But for a person like myself to go out and get a 5 acre field, I could probably lose money on it because you're only allowed to collect, let's say you make $10,000 worth of electricity a year, but your electric bill is only $5,000 a year. So at the end of June the 30th of each year, any excess money that's left over goes back to the government. You don't get it. It's not money in your pocket. So it works good for an agency like yourself that has a big use for the electricity because you'd use it all up and then probably need some more.
Okay.
But there's a lot of rules and regulations you need to know about.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
I see I got 30 seconds left.
You're doing good. Anyone else have any comments?
Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Commissioners, my name is Beth Trejos. I'm an attorney with Smith Moore Leatherwood, and I'm here today on behalf of Strata Solar to offer support for the ordinance that you're going to be discussing later today. We have worked with your planning board and with Mr. Price since the spring to craft an ordinance that we believe has been acceptable to your planning board. We're mostly available to answer questions, but just wanted to reiterate, that our dependence on foreign sources of electricity has been a great detriment to our country, and so the ability to use renewable sources that are homegrown, that create a tax base for you, but use very little resources. Solar farms are not putting any kids in your schools. They don't require any special traffic or sheriff protection. So they are a benefit to your community. Again, we're here to answer any questions that you might have as you consider it, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else have any comments? No one else has any comments. The public comment section is closed. Thank everyone for your comments. Back to new business. Wayne County Courthouse bail presentation. Mr. Wood.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to call on Marcia to handle that.
You can.
I thought it was. This is a narrative written by former Wayne County Buildings and Grounds Superintendent Shelton E. Smith. Hello, my name is Wayne, and I am a belle. My life began when I was cast from molten steel in 1851, less than a century after America became the great nation we are today. I've lived a fascinating life. Here is my story. The municipality of Goldsboro, North Carolina, was incorporated on January the 18th, 1847, and shortly thereafter, the newly elected Wayne County Fathers decided a courthouse was needed in Goldsboro, which was the seat of our county's government. After purchasing 4 acres on which the courthouse was to be built, construction began, and Wayne County's first courthouse was completed in 1850. Around that time, and in keeping with the traditions of that era, organizers decided a bell should grace the new courthouse. And after some searching in 1851, I was purchased from A. Minley & Sons Company, an experienced bell foundry that had been in business in West Troy, New York since 1826. In preparation for my arrival, County Fathers constructed a wooden bell tower where I was to be mounted, and once I became a permanent resident of Wayne County, for the next 62 years I proudly served the citizens of Wayne County without fail. But by 1912, the original courthouse was in pretty bad shape, so county leaders decided it should be torn down and a new courthouse built in its place. For the first time in my lifetime, I began to fear for my future, because I knew until a new courthouse was built, I simply had no place to go. Well, thoughtful planners took care of me, relocating me to the county health building, where I stayed until construction of the new courthouse was completed in 1913. Shortly before the new courthouse doors opened for business, I was placed in a tower behind the new courthouse where I was happy and content and certain I had found a new and safe home forever. Well, even an old bell knows nothing is forever. And in 1954, much to my surprise, Wayne County leaders decided the old, in quotes, new courthouse just wasn't big enough. So they decided to build an annex, and once again, I was in the way. Patiently I watched the new addition take shape, and when it was completed, it contained offices, a jail, and even living quarters for the jailer. I was pleased, but I began to feel a bit overlooked. Lucky for me, that feeling didn't last long, because the brand new courthouse annex had a fascinating bit of new technology I had never seen before, an elevator. And with the new elevator came a tall elevator shaft with an equipment support building at the top on the flat roof, which lent itself to some pretty decent storage space. In no time, I was relocated there, and boy did that make me happy, being up nice and high, where I could get a good look at our fine county and keep an eye on all of the important things going on. So the year was 1954 when I was placed up on that roof, and in short order, I once again began helping citizens understand exactly what was going on in our great county. You see, this was a time in our county's history when the sheriff's office was located in the courthouse and accessed from a first door entrance on the building's west side. In those days, the courthouse had no air conditioning, so windows in the sheriff's office were often open to allow for ventilation. In a manner typical of the ingenious men and women of our county sheriff's office, a rope was tied to me, and I began being rung each day to signal when court was in session, and again at the end of the day when court had adjourned. I felt special, and I was making a difference. At least that's what I thought until 1990, when once again change reared its head in my neck of the woods. In 1990, to keep up with the tremendous growth of our county, our elected officials decided they need to build a new courthouse annex. To an old bell, that news meant only one thing. The old annex had to come down, and once again, in the 139 years since my casting in far-off New York, my livelihood was threatened. During development of the new courthouse annex plans, a very nice gentleman began showing up who seemed to take great interest in me. His name was Shelton Smith, and he was the Wayne County Buildings and Grounds Superintendent. Mr. Smith's special interest in me seemed to strengthen with each passing day as he studied me and my surroundings, and he listened courteously as one person after another remarked how they would like to have me. I held my breath. Well, the news annex construction contract was awarded to a local Wayne County company by the name of T.A. Loving. Crews soon arrived to begin demolition of the old courthouse annex. But before they started, Mr. Smith drove onto the site and directed a demolition crew foreman to load me into his truck with the help of a nearby backhoe. I was dizzily whisked away on a short journey to Mr. Smith's county warehouse, where I was unloaded and stored. Under the safe, watchful eye of the Buildings and Grounds Department, I was washed and cleaned, sand and polished, until I glowed with a nice, bright, clean finish. I enjoyed my time in the old warehouse awaiting construction of my new home, but I was troubled, not knowing if, when, or where I would finally be moved. Wayne County was my home, and I just didn't want to live anywhere else. For me, relief came when I learned Mr. Smith had directed the architects designing the new courthouse annex to take special care creating 2 brick kiosks that would be visible on the right and left sides of the building's expansive interior atrium. The news was fantastic. A new home for me was being specially built where I could grace one of those brick kiosks. Atop the other kiosk, a majestic clock would keep time and help me and the residents of Wayne County stay on schedule. In November of 1994, just days before the final completion of the new Wayne County Courthouse Annex, Mr. Smith had me ever so carefully placed on a thick, comfortable rubber pad that was affixed to the top of my brick kiosk. It is there that I continue to live today. As an old bell now, my ringing days have long since expired, but I love greeting visitors each day from my home, where my place in our wonderful county's history is prominently secured. I sincerely hope I will be around for another eternity, in bell years, of course. This was submitted by Shelton E. Smith.
Thank you, Marcia. So Mr. Smith is present today. Mr. Sheldon, would you like to make any comments? Listen to him, Milton, because you might learn something.
Mr. Commissioner, it's good to be here today. Appreciate you allowing this to be done. And excuse my voice. I'm getting on in years, and I've seen a lot of days when the bell rung. But I begin to hear is it stated a lot of people saying, I'd like to have that bell. So we took care of that. It is a pleasure and an honor that I did take care of that. That's Wayne County's history. It's been here a little bit longer than I have. I've been here 85 years, and I want to keep serving a little longer. Building and Ground was a joy and a pleasure for me to serve. And I appreciate all of you. I've been keeping up with the news in the newspaper. And outside of this bill, people need to know that it exists, where it came from, when it came, and how it was moved from place to place. I showed this copy to Judge Gaylor, Charles Gaylor, a real good friend of mine. I wanted him to read it to see that his dates correspond and match my dates. And he wrote a little note back, great history to some effect. It needs to be told. And so thank you for allowing me to be here. I told Mr. Wood, I said I would read it, be glad to, but my throat closes up. And she's done a wonderful job. A whole lot better than I would. Thank all of you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheldon. What's the pleasure of the board and no action, just, okay. Thank you, Mr. Sheldon. I'm kind of a history buff myself, and I really got a good history lesson today because a lot of the things that was brought out about the bell, I just thought it was a bell, but really it is part of Wayne County's history. And thank you for doing the work on it, and thank you for saving the bell. Okay, work session. Are we ready to go to the work session, or?
Can we have a 3-minute recess?
Yes, sir, I think we have a 3-minute recess. Wayne County Board of Commissioners is back in session. We're gonna have a work session on discussion of ordinance regulating the operation and maintenance of solar energy facilities in Wayne County. Mr. Wood, Mr. Price.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Price and let him go through the project.
Good morning.
Good morning.
At a meeting, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, it might have been a month ago, we were here, we had the recommendations at that time from the planning board of the proposed ordinance regulating the operation and maintenance of solar energy facilities in Wayne County. And we had some discussion on it, and what the board asked me to do was look at and see if there was a model template that the League of Municipalities or the County Commission Association had prepared, and how ours prepared for that. And what there has been a template prepared, and it was developed by a working group that contained representatives from the NC Sustainable Energy Association, the NC Solar Center, representatives from the County Commissioners Association, the League of Municipalities, School of Government, city and county planners, and solar energy representatives. All those came together a couple of years ago and came out with a template that they all agreed on. And so what I've done is taken our proposed, and you've got a copy of it, and it's got a side-by-side comparison with the template in those sections that the template covers what we were talking about. There are some sections there that we have wording in there, part of our definitions. We define certain words that are not in the template, so there's nothing there for that. But it starts off in section 2 where we have purposes and objectives of our ordinance. Is the purpose of on the right side of that box is the wording coming from the template. And if you read both, you'll see that even though there's more words on the right, ours says the same thing, where we are talking about preserving the dignity and aesthetic quality of the county, preserve the physical integrity of the land in close proximity to residential areas, and protect and enhance the economic viability and interests of citizens and residents of Wayne County. Has made substantial financial investments in homes, businesses, and industries in the county. What the template gets into as far as purpose also is, as Ms. Trejos pointed out earlier, is that the intent of this ordinance to encourage the development of SESs, and that's what they call these systems, to reduce reliance on foreign and out-of-state resources, bolster local economic development, job creation, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and reduce local water and air pollution. So same things, different words. We move down to section 3 where we have definitions. We have definitions for buildings, fences, and gates. The first similar definition that we have with the template is the improved areas, where we define an improved area as an area containing solar panels, electrical inverters, storage buildings, and access roads. The template says that an improved area is the area of the system that contains all land inside the perimeter of the system, which extends to any fencing. We define opaque fence, we define public road, define a residential area. And then we have a definition of what we call the solar energy facility. An energy facility or area of land principally used to convert solar energy to electricity, which includes not limited to use of 2 or more solar energy systems. And we say this definition shall only include those facilities that sell electricity to be used off-site. The template is called a solar energy system. The components and subsystems required to convert solar energy into electric or thermal energy for suitable use. The reason for the two differences is we're just looking at the regulation on the larger systems. If someone wants to put something on their property for their own house, we're not being involved in regulating those. The template does get down to that level. They get down to where if somebody wants to put up one panel, there's or guidelines for that. Our ordinance will not have that much detail on it.
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
if I could ask a question here, and that is where it says the use of 2 or more solar energy systems.
They'll be compatible. So they might have two systems that are hooked in sequence with each other.
Well, why would you say 2 or more?
Well, it could be 3, could be anything more than 1 is 2 or more.
I recognize that. But my question is, why could you not just have 1?
Can, but,
Well, it says, but limited to the use of 2 or more, not 1, but it's got to be 2 or more. Oop.
yeah, I see what you're saying.
You say one or more,
Could be 1 or more, yeah.
that's
One.
what you need to be, one or more.
We could say 1, I guess, yeah. Probably a typo there, or error on my part.
So it could be 1.
1, yes. Yes.
1 or more.
Yeah, 1
Okay.
more, yes.
Yes, just say one or more.
Prohibitions, section 4, should be unlawful after the date of the effective date of this ordinance for any person, firm, corporation, or other legal entity to operate, maintain, or establish in any unincorporated area of Wayne County a solar energy facility which the site plan has not been approved by the Wayne County Plan Board. And then what the template has, this ordinance applies to construction of any new SES within the jurisdiction of the county. SES established prior to the date this ordinance shall remain exempt. Exemption modifications says any expansion by more than 5% shall be subject to this ordinance. Maintenance, repair not subject to this ordinance. The ordinance does not supersede any local, state, or regulations. Building permits, wastewater permits, stormwater permits are still required. They've got more wording there, but we don't have any wording in ours dealing with modifications. We just said that dealing with the initial system where the site plan has to be approved.
Could I inquire on this? What would be the advantage of putting in the modification?
I think just for clarification, saying, some people may be think that if you do any change, we get calls sometimes from businesses when they're replacing the face of a sign, they think they have to go through the whole permitting process again.
Well, there are a number of these systems that have been installed already without any regulation. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
My question is there any advantage maybe to including the modification provision in there, especially for those going forward that were not subject to any regulation?
Well, or you may want to add just the second sentence there. It says, an SES established prior to the effective date of this ordinance shall remain exempt. Now, if you add that in, that would clarify that those that are out there that were legally constructed over the course of the past year are exempt from any requirements of this ordinance. They would not have to go back and take down panels, put up fencing, or whatever it may be the case that it winds up being adopted.
Yeah, but my question was on the other side, and that is, would you include those? Would there be an advantage maybe to state to those?
Well, what this is saying, anything that they make more than 5%.
Modification.
Any modification more than
Then they would
5%
have
would
to
have
come back.
would have to comply with the site plan.
So like if they wanted to expand or something like that.
I'm just asking, is there any advantage maybe to add that to ours, is what I'm trying to say.
That's up to y'all. I did not have it in there. That would be more restrictive than what we currently have in there. Currently we have in there, they would be able to make the changes and they would not have to comply. If you feel like any changes more than 5% that they would need to comply, then probably that sentence would clarify that concern with that.
So, Mr. Price, based upon the question Mr. Doctor I thought was getting at, someone that's already out there, if you don't have the 5% over there in ours or some percent, then that means that they could continue to enlarge that or keep moving forward, but in contrast, someone who's starting now would have to meet certain restrictions. Is that sort of where you're going, Mr.
Well,
Carter?
that's kind of where I'm going, and that is if you're going to require someone at some point to abide by this ordinance as of an effective date, those individuals that had already developed without any of those restrictions, why would it not be advantageous to say, okay, you're fine, you're grandfathered, but if you modify it more than 5%, at some time in the future, you will have to abide by these regulations.
And you could use 5%, you could use any percentage.
Well, I
mean,
agree.
I know with the flood ordinance, you can make modifications to your house up to 50%. If you go 50%, then you have to comply with the federal flood ordinance. So you may want to say something higher than 5%. 5% to me seems low. It's almost like you can't even replace a gate for 5%. But if you have modifications over 10%, 20%, something like that, then they would have to comply.
Well, I'm just not thinking about today, but I'm thinking about 30 years from now. If they're grandfathered, there was never any regulation on them, there's not going to ever be any regulation on them, even though they replaced everything in there. They are exempt, am I correct? Unless you
Well, no,
have a
you're right.
provision in
Unless-
there.
I mean, if you say they're exempt, then they're exempt.
They're exempt.
Whereas if you
Yeah.
say they're grandfathered with the existing panels, but at such time as they go to replace those or whatever, they would have to come into compliance.
Well, that's kind of my question.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
want to be more restrictive, but at the same time, down the road, as those improvements are made, you would want them to at least adhere to what everybody else is adhering to.
Yeah.
It brings everybody back in line.
That's right.
I guess the
I
thing
believe
is, do
that.
we want to have, stick with 5%, or do we want to have some higher percentage?
Yeah, 20.
I'm okay with a 20%.
20%.
But some modification. That they would at least at some point, if they did change out everything, they would have to adhere to what.
Right, they may change out an inverter, the part that converts the solar energy to electricity. Every 5 years, they may need to replace those, but that would not rise to the level.
That's correct.
But
That's
if they
correct.
go in there and have to start replacing half the solar panels,
That's what I'm talking about.
then they would have to, they might have to change their setback requirements or fencing or whatever else we have in place at that time.
Well, now, y'all, because, you know, one is a modification, the other is replacement. So I guess we need to have that language in there to make sure we're clear that it encompasses both.
Modification and/or replacement.
And/or replacement. Because the more likely thing is you'd be replacing panels. I mean, that's, other than the inverter, that's about all there is.
Well, they already have a distinct advantage because there was no regulation placed on them at that point. And you certainly do not want that going forward for other new facilities. You at least want them equalized out at some point in the future.
Right, yes, sir.
So 20%?
20%, I guess what I've got written
You're
down.
good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions on that section there? All right, next, we move into location. We have in there, all must comply with the minimum requirements of the zoning ordinance. One part of this that's not listed here in the ordinance, but it's listed separately, I think, in one of the earlier amendments that went to you, is that we will have to amend the zoning ordinance to allow solar facilities in certain zones. Right now, it's not listed anywhere, so all the facilities that are being built in the county are outside of our zoning areas. I think it would be appropriate to allow them in the light industrial zone, heavy industry, airport industry, community shopping, all of those as permitted uses, and as special uses in the residential zones. So that way, if somebody comes in, meets the requirements of this ordinance, happens to be in an area that is zoned light industry near one of the airports, they can just proceed on without having to come to this board for a rezoning. If they want to go into a area where we have it zoned residential because it happens to be near a school or something, then they could ask for a special use permit because it may be something, it may be the site's okay, but it may be something about that particular site that it would be best not to put it there, and that's what the board has to consider site by site. So we will, if we go along with this, if we advertise this for public hearing, would be advertising it in the same, at the same time to amend the zoning ordinance to add those uses to the zoning ordinance.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
item B there, that's in our ordinance, that proposed ordinance, and that is the minimum lot says, size to be 10 acres. Is there a reason for that?
I think just that we're trying to, those that are trying to just encourage the larger ones to, I think there was some concern previously, maybe by the board, that if we had sites on smaller than 10 acres, it might wind up going into area next to, into a residential area on a 5-acre site, a 1-acre site. I think with the current, and Ms. Treyas might can answer this better than I can, with the current development that they use now, they're not going to be looking at anything smaller than 10 acres anyway.
Well, I'm sure economically, they probably are not gonna do it, but I don't know why we would need to add that. In other words, economically, 30, 40 years from now, it may be different, as far as efficiency.
Well, we'll change it at that time.
But I don't see any reason to have.
I think at this time, it's just that there was some concern that if it was allowed on, let's say, a 2-acre piece or a 1-acre piece, someone could put one right next to, right close to people's houses. And so that was what we were trying to avoid. Part of this ordinance is to avoid conflicts with residential areas. And by having a 10-acre site, you limit some of the sites.
Mr. Chairman. So with technology today, it's really not economically feasible to do anything less than 10 acres. Is that right? I really like to answer that
No,
question.
answer questions, you'll step up here.
Sure. Jay Cobb with Strata Solar, he's the best person to answer your question.
Hello, so could you state your question?
I said with today's technology, is it even feasible to do anything less than 10 acres?
It certainly is. I don't remember the exact origin of how that particular figure got in there, but it's true that the majority of projects that are happening in North Carolina these days are significantly larger than 10 acres, and that just has to do with the economies of scale. But an example would be of a smaller project would be of a company wanting to buy a system themselves. We and other solar companies would do projects that wouldn't take up nearly 10 acres if they were investing in the system themselves. But for the economies of how the larger developments work that involve third-party investors, the larger we can make the project, the better. And there's some other rules that come into play that cause that right size to typically be between 10 and, let's say, 50 acres.
But typically what you're suggesting, those who would want a smaller size like that for their company, is for their own use for their company as opposed to being sold back to utilities.
Not exactly, because sometimes even when it's beside a company's facility, for instance, and this doesn't come up a lot, but I'm involved in a project right now in North Carolina where this might take place, where a company is buying a system that's going to take up roughly 5 or 6 acres, but they're going to sell the power back to the utility just because of some other regulations that make it a little bit more economic sense than using the power directly in the building themselves.
So there may be a good reason to actually do that then.
Sometimes.
Okay.
It's not going to come up much, and that's why, we didn't, it wasn't a huge sticking point to us, but, I think it was somebody mentioned a good point. It's hard to say as time goes on, panels get more efficient, panels come down in cost, it might be easier to do projects that are smaller that would accomplish the same things.
And Mr. Chairman, let me follow up on that. And that's kind of my concern. If you're going to have a restriction of 10 acres and a company is interested in coming here and they want to actually have their own solar facility, and you got 10 acres here as a requirement, I'm just saying I don't see any reason to put the 10 acres in there. Just let economics work. If economically it's not feasible to put it there, then they won't. If in fact there's a company that wants to come here and have their own facility to generating solar for either their use or to sell back or whatever, I just wouldn't want us to preclude that. So that's the reason, I just don't see the reason for that.
Well, I mean, an example is the two new schools that we're building. They're less than 10 acres. The roof on them building is not 10 acres.
The site's about 30 acres.
Yeah.
So that's on, I just don't want, I don't see any use for that provision.
Mr. Martin.
I see Mr. Anderson has his hand up because I'm not asking to contradict anything, but I thought I heard him. What was your comment earlier, Mr. Anderson, about somebody?
Come up to the podium,
I think
please.
you might be getting ready to answer that.
A lot of the fields today are 5 acres, because that's 1 megawatt roughly, is that correct? Approximately that. And, but 25 is a popular size now because it's economy of scale, as was mentioned. But the point I wanted to make is the technology right now, they have a cell that's in production that's been tested that has a Fresnel lens that goes down to silicon wafer. And I don't recall that amount, but I think it's about 8 times improvement on the cell. So you are going to see more energy produced on a smaller amount of scale. So I tend to agree with you. It may be you want some kind of small size, but 10 acres is an awful lot.
I just want, there was one comment you made earlier. You said if an individual, I believe I remember you said an individual produced $10,000 worth and he used $5,000, the government was going to get the other part.
I'm not sure exactly where the money goes, but you don't get it because you're not allowed to profit. Not allowed to profit from it. That's correct.
And I heard you, sir, say that you're working with a company that might use part of what they had and then sell the rest of it back to a utility. Is there any well, and I know
there's a little bit of contradiction, and I'll try to clarify it as best I can, is that there's a couple of different ways a system can be configured, and in one configuration called net metering, you want to size the system so you're not producing more energy than you're actually using because of the concept that the gentleman was describing. But there's another configuration called buy all, sell all, where all the energy that's generated is put back onto the grid. And that's the configuration that typically is used most often in North Carolina with very large systems, including these what are called utility scale solar farms.
So, is that not what the school is? Is the school going to sell theirs back to the utility and then it offsets the bill?
Yeah, if you remember, he said that it was designed for 140% of their usage. So he was going to sell back 40%.
He said that?
He said that. The architect said that.
So based upon our discussion right now, if we follow the example of Mr. Gurley, I'm sorry, Mr. Dark, pardon Mr. Gurley.
Wait a minute.
All that I missed called the name, Mr. Dark.
Okay.
I'm not getting you guys mixed up. So
I told you that would happen.
If I have, say if I had a 1 acre site that I wanted to personally use, so based upon the direction that sounded like we're going, I could put whatever solar panels I could get on 1 acre of land to use for my own personal use. And it sounds like that with the new technology, rather than those panels that I can't tell exactly what, but they look like they might be 18 inches by 30 inches, and I'll just use that, but it sounds like they may be getting smaller and smaller. So then I stand a chance, sounds like, that I could use potentially a 1 acre site that I have my mind on right now and produce X amount of energy.
Well, one thing with this proposal is that if you're generating electricity for your own use, and it's not your intention to sell it and put it in the grid, this ordinance does not apply to you anyway. It's only going to apply where you have solar facilities, and that's the only thing on the site. It's not being used as part of a manufacturing process. It's not somebody putting in a facility, if they like the schools, where they put facilities for their own use. If they happen to generate anything extra, they put it to the grid. What this ordinance is covering is somebody goes out there, buys a piece of land, leases a piece of land, and start putting up panels and fences it in.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to belabor the point, but as you can see, that recommendation of size was not included anywhere in the Institute of Government's recommendation. This is something that has been recommended here locally, and I, for one, feel like that it's not needed and needs to be stricken. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else? Any more comments, Mr. Price?
Moving on down, we have, under C and D, in that same section, we have two sections there dealing with compatibility with Seymour Johnson and the ECO study. Any use or any facility that is near Seymour Johnson must be given a special use permit by the Board of Adjustment. In other parts of the county, the Board of Adjustment would not be required to issue a special use permit. What was in the template is showing that as part of the approval process that a map would be provided showing the area 5 miles around a airport and where the SCS facility is located, and that they have provided notification to the NC Commanders Council at least 30 days before the special use permit hearing.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Darling?
I have a real issue with item D there, where you basically are recommending that all solar facilities located within the 2011 ACUS report, and that goes all the way out to Greene County, any of those must receive a recommendation. Not that you're just notifying them, but you're saying that you must receive a recommendation from the base commander. And I think that's extremely.
The planning board took that out.
The planning board has taken that out.
The recommendation, it should read, all solar energy facilities located in areas covered by the 2011 ACUS report or subsequent reports must be sent to the Seymour Johnson Air Force Base Commander or a designated official for comment.
For comment. I can go with that.
That's good.
But I can't go with this one.
Well, the only other thing I would suggest there is that you have a time frame for
30 days.
that, because one of the complaints we have is we're getting these requests for review from the North Carolina Utilities Commission, and they're not giving us much time for turnaround time at all.
Sure.
As soon as we're getting them, we're forwarding them to the base, but Connie and I may get them, and they may be due back in 10 days. Well, by the time you get it out there, they send it through their process, we're bumping the deadline. So I think you ought to have a
30-day?
Or 21, I think 21 might be okay.
21?
I don't want to unduly delay the thing, but at the same time, we need a reasonable period of time for Seymour Johnson to respond.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Move on, Mr. Price.
All right, next is, we define it, says all improved areas, including disposal areas, shall be at least 100 feet from a public road, 50 feet from a fence line. In the event of an opaque fence is installed, a setback may be reduced to 20 feet. Template has 50 feet required on all sides. Template has maximum height of 20 feet. We don't have any maximum height. And then we have improved areas shall be 150 feet from a residential area, building, or churches. Template has 100 feet from a residential dwelling unit or other than the owners of a working farm.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Darling.
Well, I think this is primarily the concern, and that is that 100 feet on the front, 50 foot on the sides, how much of this property are you actually excluding from being able to generate electricity? I think that's overly, that's too much restriction there. And one of the reasons why I brought this Mount Olive ordinance, which basically says that it shall meet the minimum zoning setback for the zoning district in which it is located. And you're right, we're not zoned all through the county, so therefore that would exclude a good bit of that. But I just find it hard to imagine that if I go out here in the county and I want to build a home, build a church, that the setback is basically 60 feet from the road right-of-way, is that correct?
Yes,
Is it 60 from the road right-of-way?
yes.
Okay. And yet, if we're gonna build a solar farm, we're gonna say, hey, you gotta be 150 feet back. And I just don't quite grasp
Yeah.
what the objection is for a solar farm. A solar farm, if anything, we ought to be proud that their solar farms are here. So I have an issue on some of this.
Mr.
Thank you.
Mayor, I'm going to express my same concerns as I did last time on this, is that out in the county, 50 foot and even 100 foot, we don't, I look at it this way, if you can have a chicken or a turkey house, this shouldn't be any more restrictive than that. And it is. It's a lot more restrictive. You know, if I had a choice, what would you rather have beside of your home? Solar farm or chicken or turkey house? I mean, I just don't see us getting, this is way too much. 50 foot, to me, that's just taking, you know, that's taking a lot of property for really no reason. What we need to do is take a poll in Wayne County, and you go to any residential area, any subdivision, and ask them, what should they rather have next to their home? And let's see how the citizens feel. But 50 foot is way too much, and these opaque fences that we're talking about that can be put up, they're very expensive. I mean, they are very expensive to put up. Why not? I'm still in favor of doing no 50 foot around all sides. I'm still in favor of doing 25 feet. And if they want, and require them to put a tree barrier up or whatever. And I still have a little problem with the 100 foot setback on the front. We moved it from 150, is that right? To 100. But I still got a problem with the 100 foot setback. I really do. I think it needs to be 50 to 75. And in the county, you know, if it's in the agriculture area, we're still asking for a 100 foot setback. Is that correct?
From a road.
Oh, yeah.
From the road.
Mr. Mayor.
I got a problem with that.
What are your proposed numbers?
I think, well, 100's not that bad, but I would prefer 75. Because there's really nothing that's unsightly about a solar farm. Which is more unsightly?
Can you live with
Chicken?
60?
Yes, sir. 60 foot would be
You could
great.
live with 60?
Yes, sir.
Could you live with 25 on the fence line?
Yes, sir.
So
And that's
60
what-
and 25?
Yes, sir.
We're just giving you some numbers here. And then on F, improved areas need to be at least, it says 150, they were recommending 100. Could you live with 100 there?
Yes.
So 60, 25, and 100, we'd be happy.
Let me ask one question. This is just for clarification. When it says 100 feet, what it currently says under E, when you say 100 feet from a public road, I want to be clear about that. Are we saying the edge of the pavement or the edge of the road right of way?
Right of way.
Right of way.
All right, we need to say road right of way, because people will challenge that.
Okay.
That goes out another 30 feet.
Do I now?
That goes out another 30 feet.
That's correct.
Depending on what the state, federal highway is.
I just want to be, you got to be clear what,
Yeah, well,
where the
I'm
measurements
glad you brought that
start.
up.
That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Gurley.
I don't oppose to 60 and 25, and quite frankly, it follows the other parts of the subdivision ordinance, et cetera. But I guess what I'd like to know is the planning board's view on these numbers. Was there any particular reason you chose these numbers?
I think trying to protect the adjoining property owners. I'm trying to keep a distance between these type of facilities and existing development. That's what the purpose of this ordinance is.
I want to, reason I read that question a few minutes ago, it was because chicken houses came up. What is the setback for, what would be the setback from a house or the street or whatever, for a chicken house?
There is
or-
none.
There is
We're
none.
prohibited by state law from having any.
Prohibited by state law from having any?
Yes.
Now, okay, but the thing that came to my mind, and I think the thing that's been in my mind all along was, while the chicken house, and I won't think about it being protected, but while the chicken house could present some problems, it doesn't cover 25 acres. And a solar farm will cover 25 acres. I mean, it could cover 25 acres, so that's a much larger area that you're dealing with. I mean, I'm not saying that, you get my drift, there's a chicken house sitting there, chicken house sitting there is covering X amount of land, but that solar farm could cover up to 25 acres. And I'm not saying it's unsightly, it is a large area when you're talking about folk having houses and everything along the way. Now, I visited a place that is being developed, and across the street is a fairly large, I think it's probably developed as a double wide living area. And that's gonna be quite a glare across the road. And I'm not against it, I'm just saying that the reason that the distances were put in place in the discussion was the neighborhoods around it, not restricting, not looking at trying to keep a landowner from using their land, but comparatively speaking, the persons who had already built their properties across the street. And that's when you take into consideration where the houses are sitting, and they're not sitting 100 feet back from the road on their side of the road. The ones that I got in mind, they're sitting whatever the minimum is from the street, from the road, across that road, and then that distance, without having some setback, all those panels gonna be right up near the road. And I was reading, I'm gonna finish this bit. I was reading an article from another county, and there was quite a hue and cry over a site being put in right across from an established neighborhood. And I think the thinking was to protect the integrity of the neighborhoods that we already have in Wayne County, the investment that folk have already made against what is a new industry, and trying to put something in place that will be protection for both sides, Mr. Daughtry, and you know, so.
Mr. Chairman, could we inquire from those that are in the business, how much glare are you going to receive off of these panels if you're 100 feet away? How much glare is going to go? How much effect, what are we protecting the public from?
We think that these are very low impact uses. The panels themselves are designed to absorb the light, not to reflect it. And we have had expert testimony and special use permit and other quasi-judicial hearings that any glare associated with a solar farm is comparable to a lake or a field of wheat. So there is very little glare created by these facilities. So in many jurisdictions, they're permitted much closer to the property line than is proposed here.
I have, Mr. Chairman,
Mayor.
I have a question.
Sure.
If we go with the, say, 60-foot setback from front, do you have a problem with putting a shrubs or a tree line in front? Is that part of what we're looking at doing here?
Trees are block panels.
Right.
Well, I understand, but at one point, we're requiring stuff on the side. Are we not? So would I not block the panels also?
Sure. So we worked closely to create some plant materials that would provide buffering but wouldn't create the shade that would impact the front.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Can we not do that on the setback on the front?
I'm sure that we can.
Okay.
And the other component was that fence that was opaque as an alternative, depending on the direction the farm faces. You know, if the front happens to be an area that would create a shadow, that there would be that option of opaque fencing as well. You know, to also provide some sort of buffer but not create shade.
Okay. Could I inquire also?
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure the public's aware of this as well, and that is when you all are negotiating with a landowner for the use of that land, and that generally these are under a lease, is that correct?
Yes.
So you're leasing someone's property, and you're going to pay them based upon the usable area that you can use to provide, to produce the electricity.
Yes,
So the more restrictive that we narrow this in, the less money goes to the landowner. Am I correct in my assumptions here?
that is correct. I would also say, though, we've had a number of landowners who are leasing property to us, and they live immediately adjacent to
Sure.
it. And they, frequently, they live very close to the farm, and we have had no, negative reports from those folks.
Well, would I be also correct in saying that since this is relatively new, a lot of the fears and concerns of property owners are unfounded? It really is a misnomer. I do not see any negatives or anything that this board or any board should be doing in protecting adjacent property owners. I don't see the negatives here. It doesn't produce any odor. It doesn't produce any noise.
Correct.
I mean, what are we protecting them from?
That's my question.
We agree. And the expert testimony that we've had as we've done this across the state from appraisers and others supports that there is nothing negative associated with this use.
Now, let me go even further. I visited a tract of land, a subdivision actually, over here in Rosewood, in which the highway is going right behind there, the new bypass. And they can't sell lots in there because people are concerned that there's not any buffer between the highway and their lots. Well, folks, you can buy a lot and you produce a buffer on your side as well. So if it is an objection, you can plant trees on your property and you can buffer it all if you so desire. Am I correct?
You are correct.
Okay.
You mean from the solar
From
farm?
solar farms or from anything?
Yeah, turkey houses, chicken houses, anything.
Let me throw out an idea here. It seems to me the one thing you are trying to protect from is the aesthetics. Some people do find them objectionable to be that close to the highway and that sort of thing. One thing you might look at is that if people put in the hedging, not trees, because I understand the concern about if it gets above a certain height. But if you put in some sort of row of hedging or whatever, which gives you a very good buffer on the aesthetic side, that if they're willing to do that closer, then you give them a smaller setback requirement, because the distance is meaningless at that point. If you have an opaque fence that's blocking the objectionable view, why do you care if it's another 50 or 100 feet back? So my argument would be, looking at the economics again, is to help offset the cost of putting in that buffering, that if they're willing to do the buffering at a better rate, then you give them a smaller setback, and therefore they preserve more of their usable arable property.
That's what we're seeing.
When you cite, let's say, a 25-acre tract, if you can get that closer to the road because you're willing to do this, you've saved more arable land on the other part of the farm.
That's basically what we're saying. And
That's that much property you have not taken out of farm production also.
That's my point, and because the real thing isn't what the real objection is aesthetics. Because you're right, there's no odor, there's no noise.
I guess.
It's aesthetic.
Well, to reinforce that, back in section 3, Mr. Price, it says opaque fence. That's gonna be part of our ordinance, isn't it? The opaque fence? So I mean, it's sort of.
That was an
back-
option. If they wanted to put up an opaque fence, they could, the setback behind the fence would be shorter.
Would be what?
If they use an opaque fence instead of a chain link fence.
Okay.
So he has in what I'm suggesting.
Then
that's what
it
I'm
says
getting
that right here under E, at the top of page 4, in the event an opaque fence is installed, the setback may be reduced to 20 feet.
Well, that's,
But here's my problem.
I want to add,
I hate to
could you not also include the vegetation bushes kind of looks there where opaque is, as long as it's, covering it up?
cheapest thing.
It's expensive.
Yeah.
Then rather than, a fence is very expensive, right? Plants are probably less expensive.
Here's my concern again. What was the name of your firm? Strata. When you go out and negotiate for these facilities, and our restrictions are greater and cost more for you to use the land for our property owners, then you have an incentive to be in Duplin County or somewhere else. And there's where the rub is. I do not want our landowners restricted to the point that they are not going to be the first. We want you to be the first to come to Wayne County. We do not want to put our landowners at a disadvantage in negotiating these leases. It's just that simple. And anytime you add a berm, landscaping, opaque fences, and all that type of thing, you add cost to the facility, and you've got to factor that in when you're negotiating your lease. Am I correct?
Absolutely, it's a component of our analysis.
A component of your analysis, okay. Okay.
Well, I guess the question comes down to how much are we wanting to protect the current property owners who may have homes versus the right for a person to build a farm right up to the road, and where in there will we draw some balance of opportunity, I guess, and we don't want anybody's home to lose proposed depreciation. I guess we have some realtors in here who might say, well, you might change what a house could sell for if there's a 25-acre farm across the field. So here's what I miss. My position is this. Let's look for a distance and plants or opaque fence or something that does not become unreasonably priced, but still gives some protection to the current landowner and takes in the aesthetic value of what aesthetics is, because that will have some effect on what somebody's current home may sell for.
Well, I did check with tax office on this about how these facilities may affect adjoining property values. And because of their being so new, because of there not having been sales on adjoining property, they don't know yet if it will affect it, if it will be an impact. If someone has to wind up selling their house for less, if they're next to one of these, then they could otherwise sell that house if it was somewhere else in the county. It may take a few years for that to work itself out. And in the meantime, somebody's house may have dropped in value.
Well, Mr. Price, you're kind of leading up to a question I was going to ask you. I don't know, I can't speak for the other board members, but I've had no calls or complaints from anyone and we've got several solar farms or solar facilities in the county now. I've had no calls, no complaints on that particular issue. I've had plenty of calls on other issues, but not on that issue. Do you know, has your office or the inspections department, have y'all received complaints?
We have not, but I think we've been fortunate so far in that the ones that have been built have not been built close to other houses.
Okay. Mr. Mayor.
I'm having a problem understanding the value of property, because if you go back to my old cliche, what about if someone decided to build a turkey or chicken house on this property? How would that affect?
Well,
how would it affect the value? And furthermore, I think it's up to the neighborhood and the community, if they don't want any of these in that area, to come and lobby against it. That's what we do. But the key is that I would recommend, and I'm just going to do a recommendation here on item E, that we go with the 60 foot or maybe even 100, but 60 I'm recommended with berms. I don't see why we can't put some type of foliage in the front to protect the setback. 25 foot on the side. Do away with the opaque fencing altogether. Go with the 25 foot around the property. And then item F, I'm recommending, like Commissioner Daugherty suggested, that we move it to 100 feet. Improved area shall be at least 100 feet from any residential area, building or churches. And then a 100-foot setback for any residential dwelling unit other than the owners on a working farm. So I could live with that as a commissioner. Ma'am, if you have any concerns about that?
Just a question. You are suggesting that along the front setback, there would be 60 feet setback from the public right-of-way, and then there would be some plantings, perhaps the plantings described in paragraph H, evergreen plants 8 feet apart, 4 feet tall at the time of planting. And then there would be a 25-foot setback around the sides. Would you have to have plantings adjacent to comparable uses, the industrial, agricultural, timber, or other commercial uses, or?
I wouldn't think so.
Okay, so it would only be, the plantings would be against the public right-of-way, and then if it were adjacent to a residence.
That's what I would say.
I can live with that.
I can live with that.
I can live with that.
Again, let me clarify something. On F, you've got improved areas shall be at least 150 feet from any residential area, building, or churches, and we're saying change that to 100 feet. But I want to be clear about that. You're saying, it's clear you're saying from any residential area, but define area. Is that 100 feet from the building? Is what? Residential area. 120 miles.
But then that means.
What I'm not clear about is, are we talking about the residential lot? Are we talking about 100 feet from the lot line or 100 feet from a residential building?
The building.
Yeah,
So
I was
if
told
they've got a
building.
75-foot backyard, you've already taken 75 feet of 100 feet.
Okay, well, we just need to be clear about it, because it's not clear how it's worded, is all I'm saying. You got, improved areas should be at least 100 feet from any residential structure, shouldn't we?
That's
Well,
correct.
keep them away from the area also.
Well,
I'm not clear about that. What do you
well,
mean
it
by
is
that?
ambiguous, and let me show you why. Because in Wayne County, you can build a home with a 15-foot setback in an unzoned area. 15 foot from the sides setback.
Okay.
Is that correct?
10 foot on the side, then.
Well, you know, it is 10 foot. Excuse me, it is 10 foot. So if that structure is 10 foot off the property line, you're going to have to be 90 foot in from that structure.
Right.
You see the,
And so we also wondered, is the distance measured on the solar farm side to the first solar panel or to the fence?
well, that's a good question too.
The fence is probably going to be to the solar panel.
Okay, to the first solar panel.
Right.
But all that
Because
has
the
to be
fence is
defined.
not objectionable, it's the solar panels. is
Yeah.
what people find.
But
That's
you
right.
have to define that as
Well,
well.
all I want to do is be clear what the measuring point is. Are you going to use the property line, or are you going to use the structure? It just needs to be clear.
You do.
Well, you do what you want to do, but it needs to be clearly defined here, and this, to me, is not a clear definition. Now, it goes on to say from any residential area, building, or churches, but again, we need to be clear. Are we talking about the property line? Are we talking about the building?
Structure, building.
And then the other question is on residential, does that mean the primary structure? Because you don't want it necessarily from some guy's utility storage shed, out in the backyard somewhere.
That's true.
So you just need to be more precise on the definition here is all I'm saying.
Yeah. That's up to the county attorney.
So, out in the country, you're gonna find some folks got a yard that extends it looks like it's a field, but it's still a yard. And based upon what Mr. Wood's saying, if that's not clear, it can gonna be detrimental either way. It's gonna cut back on what a developer could do, but it's also gonna put that solar panels real close to that person's yard, who has been having as a yard all this time,
In which case, you may want to have a minimum setback from the adjoining property line. For instance, if somebody had 2 acres of land and put a house out there, you could theoretically be more than 100 feet away from the property line, then that solar farm could start right on the edge of his yard.
That's what I'm
You
getting.
may want to write this to say, but in no event can it be closer than X number of feet to the adjoining property line. And that might be 20, 25 feet or whatever, but there ought to be some minimum there, it seems to me. And that's not a huge encroachment on the property that wants to do the solar farm. They wouldn't be giving up a whole lot there, but that gives the protection for somebody who that building may be more than 100 feet away.
Connie, what's the rear setback in the subdivision?
Subdivision, 25 feet.
So that
I
might
think 10 foot's too close, but I could live with the rear setback.
Yeah. And I would just have that as a minimum, that in no event can it be less than 25 feet.
From the property line.
From the adjoining property line. And that way you protect against that problem.
I'll go along with that.
I can go along with it.
I sure can. It looks like there's a lot of work to be done here.
There he is.
I don't
think
this
we're
is
gonna
a
get
work
it.
session, this is not an action item.
Right.
Okay, anything else on that part?
Now, generally, if you can get that resolved, we can kind of move forward.
The question I'd like to make sure of now, Marcia, are you taking notes on what the different commissioners say they're willing to live with today? Because I'm just, they might, I mean, gentlemen, you know, another day and another discussion, if we don't have it written down, they might change. And that's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is, this is such a very discussion item. I just want to make sure that we don't come back another time and we inadvertently
And not remember, huh?
can't remember.
They're making a tape of this.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor,
I just want to be clear on Stratus. The Stratus, do you see anything that we have discussed so far that you have an issue with?
I think, you know, we support the improvements that you have suggested, the clarifications with regard to the setback from a residential structure to the first solar panel. And with a 25-foot maximum setback, we support that.
You support that?
Yes,
25
I'm sorry, minimum.
Minimum.
Yes.
Yeah.
We support that, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, under H, all facilities shall have a minimum landscape buffer. If they're in a residential area, 50 feet, the buffer shall contain, it has plants. That buffer should not be required between the solar energy facility and industrial, agricultural, timber, or commercial use. Planted buffer will not be required if an opaque fence is installed. And then what it has in the template is that solar energy system shall be constructed with buffering as required by the applicable zoning district or development standards.
Now, why are we putting a 50-foot buffer in there?
To protect the residential areas,
50 foot?
yes.
Why not 200 foot?
That would be good.
I don't understand why we would want to put a 50-foot buffer.
I think if you have
50
anything
foot
less-
is excessive.
If you have anything less than that, you may as well not have it.
Well, why? You could take a 25-foot setback, put in shrubbery or a berm or whatever to separate that off, and you've resolved the entire issue, and you have not financially affected the viability of the use of that property. You don't have to have 50 foot. So I'm just saying, let's find a way to where you can maximize the use of the property to help the property owner with, at the same time, on the residential side of that, if you've got a property that's butting up to a residential area, that you berm it, and they berm everything now. They protect it by use of land and natural landscaping.
Well, one thing with the berm, when they're usually with subdivisions, the dirt that makes the berm
Right.
is coming from when they're grading the street.
Well,
It's extra
agreed.
dirt they got. they moved over to make the berm.
Agreed,
In this case, if you put a berm up here, they're gonna have to bring in dirt from somewhere else.
agreed.
This is gonna add to their cost.
But let's give some options in there, is what I'm saying. I just don't think you're going to protect a residential neighborhood by a setback of 50 foot, because it's all gonna be mowed anyway. It looks like you just have a larger distance in there. The only way you're gonna protect it and separate it out is to screen it by some landscaping or something.
That's what we're talking about here.
Well,
Landscape buffer.
I just see a minimum landscape buffer of 50 foot. That's a big area. I just have a problem with that. Change that to 25 and I'll go with it.
You want a 25?
Yeah, let's go 25.
I can live with that.
You go 25, just make sure it's a landscape buffer.
Well, this raises a question I'm not sure it doesn't. When this was originally, there was a 50 feet originally and the evergreen trees are planted no more than 8 feet apart, would that mean that if you came in 25 feet, should the plants not be planted more than 4 feet apart so as to further, I'm just asking a question, Joe, to protect the integrity of the property next door? You said, the closer you get to it, the more.
But you're minimizing the depth, is all you're doing.
Well, I know, but when the bushes
The trees
grow-
aren't gonna be 50 foot wide to start off with.
No, but listen to me again now. You know, you're missing, I think, you're missing the intent of my point. If the distance was 50 feet away and you planted 8 feet apart and you're over there, when you look at it, I think that distance is gonna be one thing. You come in 25 feet and you leave them 8 feet apart, you're gonna see more of a gap. Am I missing it?
Eight
Yeah,
foot,
you can see the same gap.
8
That's what I'm getting at.
8
You
foot
see
is
the
not
same
very far,
No.
and it doesn't take a bush long to grow.
That's center to center,
Yeah,
so.
I would be
I mean-
concerned about the viability of the plants if they were too close together.
Yeah, right.
Our landscape architects tell us there needs to be a certain distance between them to allow them to grow.
That's right. Yep.
Well, again, I don't mean to be a grammatician or whatever they are here, but it seems to me that what we're trying to get to is through a combination of a buffer and then the planting on top of the berm. Shouldn't we stipulate, what's the height we're looking for? Because it's in aggregate, isn't it?
Well, I agree, I
And some-
agree.
And
to
so,
some
do
extent.
you care how much of that is berm and how much of that is vegetation? And I'm just asking the questions because we need to be
I think they have a
specific.
concern over height.
We do have a concern about height because it does create shadows on the panels. The other thing, what Mr. Price said to you about construction of the berms, we do no grading on our sites, virtually no grading. And so,
Yeah,
our
hollow.
preference would be landscaping and not the installation
Sure.
of the berm. What we frequently see are a minimum height at planting, which you have 4 feet set out here, of a species designed to reach a certain height at maturity. Recognizing that, we don't want it to be particularly tall because of the shadows. But the panels themselves and the racks are generally less than 10 feet tall. So certainly there could be a buffer created that would obstruct the view of, or obscure the view of those things without casting a shadow.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor.
what height do you have in mind?
We generally see plantings in the 4-foot range. What you have here is
Right,
not
but
something.
maximum height.
Mhm. And then it tends to be things like, the only variety coming to mind right now is Leland cypress, but things like that
Yeah.
tend to reach, in Jay, maybe you can add more.
4 feet would be at time of planting.
What
Yeah,
would be,
typically what we see, I think, and this is not my exact area of expertise within the company, but usually the ordinances that we're familiar with, that, we live with, it says that at the time of planting, they're in the range of 3 to 4 feet, but then they're gonna grow, I think it's like 8 to 10 feet or up to 10 feet within a certain number of years, which is usually 3 to 5 years, something like that. And I don't think Leland cypress actually is a good example of that, because I do think they get too big. I think it's maybe
Attorney
like
not messy.
wax myrtles or something, but anyway. So there are certainly types of trees that meet that criteria, that they grow relatively quickly, but then don't get too tall after that number of years. And the reason, of course, that we prefer to have the concept in there that they're in the 3 to 4 foot range at the time of planting is that it's significantly more expensive to plant a 10-foot tree than a 3-foot tree.
But we need to establish a minimum height as far as our, no, I'm talking about at full maturity.
Yeah,
That's cool.
that's right, because that's your buffer.
That's your buffer, okay?
But Ray, I would say that it's a minimum height when you take into account any berm and the growth. Because I understand what he's saying about he may not put a berm in.
Right.
But if someone chooses to.
Right, or combination
Because
thereof.
they may have the type of
Yeah.
terrain where the berm could be.
Right, so a combination of the berm and what would be that height? 20 foot?
No.
No, I would
More
take,
like
if
10
the
feet.
panels are 10 feet.
Okay, 10
should
feet,
do.
say 15. You got to have a little bit of play here
Yeah,
from
I'd
your
say
panel, right?
10 foot's high, but
10
you got,
foot?
yeah, if you got a 10-foot tree there.
Well, if
Well,
you're
you go block
walking,
it.
if you're walking or riding along that road in front of it, you're not going to see over that 10, if they're
That's
10 foot
right.
high.
That's
You're right.
And
Okay,
that's
10
why I
foot,
think 10 foot has been used.
10
in
foot,
very recent.
okay, 10 foot minimum height. Combination of berm and landscape.
Within so many years.
Within so many years.
Well, 3 to 5 years.
Just a
Is that-
question. If you got a 10-foot tree, how far back do you set your panels? Just out of the shadow. Just,
Shouldn't have to do it a
I
whole
just was
lot.
curious. I don't know.
It's at the same height.
Yeah, I can't give you an exact figure, but you're gonna have the fence behind it, and then we're gonna have naturally a gap between the fence and the edge of the panels. That's, typically gonna be, at least 20 feet.
And at a certain angle, you're not gonna get any absorption, right?
That's right.
Right, I mean, the.
I'm talking about when you
panels are
get the long shadow from the sun going way down, you're not getting absorption at that angle anyway, are you?
Right, I mean, the systems are designed for peak periods of time during the
Right.
day to produce a certain
That's my
amount
point.
And Connie, if I could, I'd also recommend that we put in there that any trimming be done that cannot reduce it below the 10-foot height.
Right.
Because if that tree is growing up to 12 foot and you want to trim it, you can trim it back down to 4 foot.
Right.
You see, so let's all also put in there that any trimming would not.
It has to reach that
That's
and maintain it.
Maintain minimum mature height of 10 feet.
There you go. So-
Okay. So-
Okay. Goodness, we're taking some time on this.
Well, hey, we're
Yeah,
making,
But you're making good progress.
making good progress,
Getting it defined.
more than we've ever had. Yeah.
Okay, next section, there was security, there was no comparable wording. Supplemental regulations under A, dealing with signage. Has different ways of defining the signage. Then B, C, D, and E is ours. F through L is just the counties. The model template has a section on decommissioning. We do not have anything on that.
Now, why did we not put anything on that?
It is not an issue.
What it will be. I mean, at some point, you're gonna,
It's gonna be some of it.
there's gonna be something there.
What's that?
Decommissioning. If you don't have a provision in there, these things could just stay there.
Oh, yeah, you've got to have something in
Yeah,
there for
yeah.
decommissioning.
Yeah.
Mount Olive, number H on Mount Olive.
That's right. You gotta have something in there.
Yeah.
They put it back on the landowner. to do
Well,
it.
The thing we gotta remember too is Duke is under a 12.5% requirement that 12.5% of their power be renewable. And my understanding is they're getting close to that already. So what happens if we get more than is usable? Then the question becomes, what happens to those excess panels out in the marketplace?
Ain't that percentage supposed to go up over the years?
Well, it's supposed to, but there's also people in the legislature who want it to go the other way.
Yeah.
You got to remember, you're dealing with a pretty big outfit when you're dealing with Duke Energy.
But I believe it's decommissioning it, you gotta have it in there.
Mr. Chairman, just,
Would you speak into the microphone? They
Sure,
cannot
I'm
hear
sorry.
you.
Just a point on decommissioning. It is, something that's a bit unusual in the development industry. You know, as land use is my practice area, and as I go around the state representing folks wanting to build commercial centers, office buildings, manufacturing plants, we're never asked to provide a solution for when the development becomes unusable. So it is a question that is unique here. We have found in working with our engineers that the salvage value of the panels exceeds the cost of removal, and we think that is by significant amounts. And we think that that is sufficient incentive to encourage a landowner or a solar company to remove the panels when the time comes. The way that Strata builds their facilities, there are concrete pads for the inverters, but for the panels themselves, they're racks sunk into the ground, and so they're very easily removed. We feel like that there are economic incentives for the decommissioning, for the removal, and that it isn't something that you need to legislate, and that it would be unusual for you to do that.
Let me counter that, though, is if the economic incentive is there for them to salvage, then there should be no problem with them meeting the requirement if you put it in.
Right, and so
what's the problem?
So there's no problem with removing it at the time. The question is, what is the decommissioning requirement? We've seen some very onerous requirements in communities where we do not do business. We've seen communities ask for bonding and things like that.
We're not asking for that. We're asking for removal when it's no longer used within a set amount of time.
Okay, so all you're asking for is just a statement that the facility would be decommissioned.
Yeah, let me read you a statement and see if you have a problem with this. Abandonment. It is the responsibility of the partial owner to remove all obsolete or unused systems within 12 months of cessation of operations. Reusable components are to be recycled whenever possible.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's
what the state has, Andy was showing me this, what the state has is having decommissioning, parentheses, removal terms for the solar equipment at end of lease so the land can be used for other purposes.
Right, right.
So we're not talking about bonding requirements or anything like that. We're just saying that when it's abandoned, the lease is over, if it's not renewed and you're not using it for up to a certain amount of time, then it needs to be removed. And what I'm hearing you say is there's enough economic salvage value that they would want to do that anyway, but we don't want that blight sitting out there.
Right.
Because while you're using it, you're going to maintain it well, but once it's not being used, just like most things, it's not going to be maintained very well.
We don't object to that.
Okay.
You're putting it on the land,
Yeah.
I want to be responsible.
Well, and then he should put it in his lease.
Well, and generally, all you have to do probably is just open the gates up and say free.
It depends on how much aluminum's in there.
How do we write that into an ordinance?
I don't know, it's not copper, they don't put the copper.
That's a lot of money if it's aluminum.
Oh,
Most of it is.
Well, she's making a good point. It'll probably be done anyway, but we need assurance that
That's
it's going to be done.
Okay, moving on then to site plan.
Excuse me, I'm going back to section 6. I had a problem here. Solar energy facilities shall be fenced completely as defined in section 3 above. The perimeter fence shall be designed to restrict unauthorized access. Got no problem there. If a wire fence is used, vegetation above must be planted along the sides and adjoining a public road. So automatically, you're already writing in here that you're going to put a buffer along sides of the fence adjoining a public road.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So that's already required?
Yes.
On the front?
Yes.
But that's your 10-foot high buffer, right?
That's what the buffer is.
That's what I'm saying.
But that would not be, this part here would not be requiring it along the side. It'd be elsewhere along the side if it was next to a residential area. We will require it along the road if it's along the road, no matter what.
So if I'm reading that correctly, you were already having buffer on the front where you've got a public road. It was just the sides.
Yes.
And you were talking about if it's residential, that moving that to 50 foot.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Mayor.
So that is referring to only if it adjoins a public road, is that correct?
Oh, yes, sir.
I'm sort of looking at this thing, and you could read it both ways. I thought when I first read it, it meant all the way around
No, sir.
the
This is-
property.
If it comes out to the road, if it's sitting, we've got some facilities in the county that are set back 200 or 300 or 400 feet off the road.
Yeah,
In that case, this would not apply.
okay.
Well, but
But
you have to
it
define
may be,
that.
but it may be, it says adjoining a public road. So those off the road do not adjoin the road.
Connie, could I suggest one other thing? Since it's obvious we're not ready to go to public hearing on
That's
this.
correct.
We've
We're
got some
not.
things we gotta
No,
work
we-
through.
But y'all need to work through all
Well,
that.
what I'd suggest is we schedule another work session like we're doing today, because I think we made a lot of progress. And make the changes that we've talked about. And then what I would suggest is, it's always been my belief in dealing with zoning issues, setbacks and all that, that a picture's worth 1,000 words. I think we ought to take some scenarios and have Connie work them up where we can stick them up on the screen and show exactly what would take place under different scenarios. Particularly one where it's adjacent to a residential area, and that sort of thing. And that way it would clearly show you by picture how this thing's being interpreted and what exactly would be there on each one, what would be required on each one.
Okay.
Move on.
Are we gonna go on through the list, or can we schedule another one? I think we're running out of time here anyway. So can we just go ahead and?
That's the pleasure, that's the pleasure of the board.
Yeah, I got a
think-
headache.
When we talk about
I think
decommissioning,
that-
there's nothing else left.
Well, you got section 8 there, it just has site plan, that's not a difference.
Oh, okay, excuse me.
It just says that the owner or developer shall submit a site plan to the planning board for their approval, showing the property lines, buildings, road right-of-ways, and that the planning board has 90 days to take action. Comparable was that a site plan submitted to the zoning administrator showing the same things. And then a special use permit was issued in all areas except industry. That was in the template. So we're not requiring a special use permit unless it's in an area near Seymour Johnson. Unless you want to. So that's the only thing on that. The rest of it, the last part dealing with violations and enforcement are parts that were not in the template. Any other questions?
Well, my only other comment is, any way you can get it back to where it was kind of like this would be helpful.
I
Let's make
think
it,
the problem in using this example is there are a lot of things that are in the Mount zoning code that we're covered because of going countywide and we're not in a fully zoned area.
That's right.
okay.
Some of the things that are in our zoning ordinance, though, actually would cover some of these things here. For some areas.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do think, Mr. Chairman, I do think we made some progress.
We did, definitely, no doubt. Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to thank you for the time to listen to us and to tell you how much we have enjoyed working with Mr. Parker and Mr. Price and your planning board. Everybody's been wonderful to us, and so we thank you for your time today.
well, we're trying to protect both parties. I mean, the citizens and, you know, y'all as an industry. Thank you.
All right, where are we?
Okay, our work session is closed.
Thank you.
County managers, comments?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a couple of things very quickly. In your info packet in the back, just wanted to call your attention, you've probably already seen it, but a couple of you made requests for further information. One was Milford told you he had the engineering study on 3 different buildings. That's in there on the evaluations. Second thing is, I believe Commissioner Mayo had made the request of the tax administrator about how many approvals we had made for late applications, for exemptions. That's in there as well. And the only other thing I wanted to mention to you is we're very close to making appointments on 2 department heads, and should be doing that sometime within the next week. And that's all I have.
Okay. Board of Commissioners Committee reports and comments. Mr. Bell.
The only thing I had, Mr. Chairman, was the jail, and I think we need to postpone that until our next meeting, that should have something then.
Right.
Those are the comments I have.
Mr. Pate.
Might be real short today too, because we're running out of time. We did have a DSS meeting last Monday, and I asked Ms. Jones if she would go over the impact to Wayne County as to what the state budget really came out. And we didn't get through all that. There was one thing that did come out that was really disturbing, and Mr. May and I both talked about this, that when they changed the county child care allocation formula, it impacted not only those who live in our communities, but it also impacted some of the employees that work at DSS. I don't know how many more county employees it did impact, but I know we got at least 4 DSS employees with 8 kids that were being subsidized, and it may impact whether they continue to work for us or not. And I just wanted to, it just disturbed me, and I had to share that. But anyway, that's all I'm gonna say today.
Mr. Chairman, could I interrupt? I think we're going to need another section of the closed session, so I don't think we're going to finish before lunch. That tour is at 12, so in the interest of time, I thought we may want to...
Just recess?
Yes, sir. Recess now, get over there for the 12 o'clock, and then come back, and we can finish the comments and the closed session.
How about if we go to take the tour, grab a bite to eat, and then come back?
I vote for that.
I'll vote for that too, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have a motion that we go with recess and